Hello and welcome to today's episode. We will be discussing the game Resident Evil, the very first game that came out originally on the PlayStation, and it was Capcom basically inventing the survival horror genre in a way. While there was other games prior to this that Resident Evil definitely took inspiration from, like Alone in the Dark, but this is the one that I feel definitely put this genre on the map and kind of give it its name, basically from what I remember. But yeah, I mean, it's while the original one doesn't hold up quite as well nowadays, it is still definitely a classic, worth exploring still and going back to, and definitely one that just really reinvigorated not only it became an incredible series going forward for Capcom, that's still going strong to this day, but also just for the survival horror genre, as there was a lot of games that eventually wanted to either mimic it, compete against it, and all, and so definitely started popularizing scary games. But before we get into that, though, what I do here on my podcast is first we have a little segment called Roulette of Gaming. And so what I do is that I have an Excel sheet that I've just been adding a bunch of games on there from all generations, all the way from the second to the ninth generation, and then I just randomly pick 7 games from there per week. And so basically, so there's a game per day of the week that I will talk about a bit here on my podcast here, and for how much I know about the game. So if it's one I'm familiar with, I'll give a little mini review, or if it's not one that I'm familiar with, just what are the likelihood maybe that I'll play it or recommend it, and then I'll post some kind of a gameplay segment of it on my YouTube channel, Arcade Amigo, along with my TikTok channel as well, to Arcade Amigo. And then after that, we get into some modern gaming news. And so the point of this is that I'm not so much where I'm up to date on all the modern gaming news that's out there, but just more I try to keep up with it as much as I can, and then just discuss it here in a more casual approach. So again, my hope is just that you're listening to this almost as if you were listening or talking to a friend about video games, and that way we can just sort of be entertained by what's going on out there, but at the same time, like I said, right and all, I'm not able to keep up with everything up to the minute. um, I work full time, and I'm a husband and father, and so definitely don't have the time to, get in, be super involved with like the news and all. But that's, I guess, kind of the thing, right? For anybody that just wants to have a casual conversation on getting kind of up to speed on things, even if we're a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months or years late to the party. But that's my hope, anyways, with this podcast, right? It's just like if you're just talking to a bud of yours. And then after that is where we'll get into the main meat of the podcast, which is again a little bit of a retrospective, a little bit of a review, and some personal history with the game. And again, in this case, it's for Resident Evil. Well, let's start off here though with the games that I have selected for Roulette of Gaming. And so again, we got 7 games here, and we got, like always, quite the variety. And so we're starting off with Wipeout Fusion. Wipeout Fusion is the Wipeout game that came out on the PlayStation 2. And I think, actually, I'd have to think about it a bit, but I want to say I think it was the only Wipeout game that we got on the PlayStation 2. I think, right? And which is interesting because for me, Wipeout, it's an incredible series. I mean, I really enjoyed it. Specifically, Wipeout Excel. That's still one of my favorite games of all time. But I feel like the series peaked though with the PlayStation, the original one. And there was some good Wipeout games that came out afterwards. Like there was this one. There was like I think two Wipeout games on the PSP, and then there was a Wipeout Omega, I think is what it's called, on the that came out original on the PlayStation 3 and then 4. And so they're good games and all, but like I said, I feel like the series peaked with the PlayStation, and which is interesting because Wipeout games have been known for when they come out, right, to have really incredible graphics, great soundtrack, great game mechanics and all, and that it peaked during the original PlayStation. It's kind of interesting, for how much more powerful hardware we got afterwards. But yeah, Wipeout though, Fusion, I remember buying this game on the PlayStation 2. I want to say I think it was one of the few games that had that was on a CD-ROM. Actually, I don't know if I'm right on that, because early on in the PlayStation's lifetime, there was a few games that were on a CD-ROM as opposed to a DVD, and you could always tell by the bottom side of the disc where it was like a kind of like a blue colored. And was Wipeout Fusion one of those? Maybe not. I forgot. But anyways. It's a great game. It's not the one of the more memorable Wipeout games, but still pretty fun overall. Has a pretty cool soundtrack, and the graphics at the time were pretty impressive, right? Because we're jumping up to the next generation, right, from the original PlayStation, and also things running at 60 frames per second now. So it looked pretty incredible at the time. And yeah, I mean the tracks were pretty cool. It had a pretty cool like tournament mode and all, if I recall. But something about it though, for some reason, it just doesn't quite stand out as much as the other ones. I think one of the things that really made Wipeout XL stand out for me, other than that it just played really well and for its time looked great and all, was also the soundtrack. I mean, that Wipeout XL had the banger of a soundtrack that definitely probably my favorite game of all time that has the best licensed soundtrack. Where it had a lot of popular artists at the time. And the other Wipeout games, I mean, they all have really excellent soundtracks. It's just that the music and the artists, they weren't quite as recognizable as, like, again, for example, Wipeout XL. And maybe that's why that one stands out to me more. But either way, though, I mean, great game overall. I would definitely say that if you're into the Wipeout game, definitely give this one a shot. Although, again, the only just kind of like was pretty much all the Wipeout games, except for like the most newest one. The only way you can really play this game, as far as I know, is just through emulation. So, but if you can't fire it up on a PlayStation 2 emulator, it does run really well. So, that is a good option there if you have to go that route. But next up, though, is a game on the Sega Genesis, and it's Ren and Stimpy presents Stimpy's Invention. So this came out obviously during the Genesis lifetime, and it was also like in the '90s too, where Ren and Stimpy was just huge, right? We had those weird, zany Nickelodeon cartoons, and Ren and Stimpy was definitely one of the more bizarre cartoons out there. But I remember having a lot of fun with the Ren and Stimpy cartoons back in the day, and so obviously it was pretty popular. So there was a lot of merchandise and licensed products that came out based off of Ren and Stimpy. One of them being this video game here. Super Nintendo, if I recall right, actually had like 3 Ren and Stimpy games, and I didn't know that until just somewhat recently. I'm not familiar with those there, but I was very familiar with this one here, and this is actually, I actually feel like it's a bit of a sleeper hit on the Genesis. It's a side-scrolling platformer where you have some action to it, I guess, but also some puzzles to solve and all as you're going through these kind of crazy levels that are inspired by the cartoon, and it's a lot of fun. It's the voice samples too that are on it are actually somewhat decent, right, for the Sega Genesis, and just seeing Ren slap the shit out of Stimpy, you stupid idiot, it just never gets old. But it's a bit grotesque, right, just like the cartoon. But it's a lot of fun, and definitely would recommend it if you're looking for a fun Sega Genesis game. The graphics overall are pretty nice and mimic the cartoon pretty well as well too. And yeah, it's pretty funny. My daughter, my oldest daughter, I forgot how we came about it, but somehow we were talking about like things that like I was into right when I was a kid. And actually, Ren and Stimpy came out more when I was already starting to become a teenager. But I was showing her a few episodes of that, like the one where Ren is Ren and Stimpy, the happy happy joy joy one. So she thought it was kind of funny, a bit gross. But so I showed her the game, and she got a kick out of it for a bit. So she played it for a little bit. But it's funny though because sometimes I'll be like, some of the stuff that they watch, and I'm like, it's kind of weird shows that you kids watch nowadays. And she's like, Dad, you had Ren and Stimpy. I'm like, yes, we did. We did have Ren and Stimpy, and that was highly bizarre. So it's like, okay, I can't say much after that. But yeah, Ren and Stimpy though, pretty good game. Like I said, if you're wanting to check out some like a decent little platformer game on the Sega Genesis, or just if you're a fan of the cartoon also. But next up though is Sonic Spinball. And so Sonic, started becoming popular, during the Sega Genesis days when, the first game originated on there. And so immediately Sega just wanted to, cash in on this property that they had now developed. And so aside from like the mainline games, right, Sonic 1, 2, 3, and then Sonic and Knuckles, they also tried to do some spin-off stuff. And so one of the first spin-off games from Sonic, if not the first one, was this game here, Sonic Spinball. Now, this game seems to make a lot of sense. It's a pinball game, right, based on Sonic. Seeing as Sonic can roll up into a little ball, right, and blaze all over the screen and all, it seems to make sense. But a little bit that I've played of this game, I can't really get into it. I think one of the main things that bothers me about this game is that Sonic is a very fast character, right? You want him to feel not only that he goes fast, but feels like he's going fast. And the Sega Genesis games did that really well. Part of it being because the game just ran at 60 frames per second. It's like most 2D games back in the day. there was a handful of games back then, and I didn't know it back then, right, about frames per second or anything, but there were just some games that played slow, and I hated that. And Sonic Spinball was one of them because the game runs like at 30 frames per second. And so because of that, the controls just kind of feel a little sluggish and all. And so, I mean, admittedly, I haven't given this game too much of an honest chance, but the bit that I played of it, I'm like, yeah, I'm good, right? If I was to play a pinball game like this, I'd rather go back to like, from this generation, like Alien Crush or Devil's Crush. And those games just played a lot better. But, if you're a Sonic fan, right, and if you're into pinball, I would say it's worth trying out. Sonic Spinball has been on a lot of different Sega Genesis compilations. It wouldn't be too hard to find, or it's pretty. I mean, it's easy to emulate. But yeah, just kind of. I don't know. For me personally, right, not something that I really enjoyed too much. But if you're a big Sonic fan, you might get some enjoyment from it, I would say. Next up, though, we're going even further back, and this is, I was getting like a lot of retro games, not a whole lot of new games that that's been selected, but in the past, few weeks actually. I mean, I had two this past week, but um, or yeah, a lot of these games are going old school though, but which is cool. But we have Batman, and this is the Batman that came out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And this one, for being such a Batman geek, I haven't played this one too much. It was developed by Sunsoft, and it's known to be a really difficult platformer. I think I've beaten the first stage, and I got up to the second stage one time when I was trying, and I was like, okay, this game is hard. And for me nowadays, I mean, I grew up on these old school difficult games, but as I'm getting older, I have to kind of be in the right mindset nowadays to play a game like that. Because they really, challenge you, right? And sometimes I'm like, I just kind of want to play more casually, And so when I played this, I don't know, it was a few years back to test it out. I was like, okay, this game is hard, and a lot of times when I'm trying out games, it's kind of late at night and all, and my brain's already, just overloaded with a bunch of other adult crap. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll come back to this game at some point and give it a chance, which I haven't done so yet. But that's not to say anything about knock against the game, right? I mean, the game actually is really well done. Controls are really tight. You get a lot of cool moves in it. And, the graphics for the time were pretty decent for the Nintendo. And it surprisingly has, well, I guess maybe not too surprisingly, but it has really great music. But Sunsoft back in the day was known to make really good music for the systems that they were making games on. For example, the Super Nintendo. I mean, think like Blaster Master, that has incredible music. A lot of the Sega Genesis games, like the Batman game on the Sega Genesis, has, really great music. And so, however they were doing it, they were just really good at making some good soundtracks. But yeah, Batman. I mean, it's a cool game. I definitely want to go back and check it out at some point. Maybe, I don't know, someday I'll have Batman marathon and play some watch games on there. But yeah, Batman, the one on the Nintendo, is pretty good. The only thing about it though is that as you're playing it though, right? Yes, your character looks like Batman. Yes, Batman's on the title screen, and as you're playing the game though, it's like this doesn't feel like a Batman game though. And granted, back then, really, I mean, we were just kind of limited to like some kind of like an action platform or maybe like a top-down action game, right? Because there was only so much you can do with a game back in those days, right? But it kind of feel, and I could be wrong, but I think I heard that this game was going to be something else, but then they just sort of slapped the Batman license on it, right? It just kind of reanimated the game, right, and the look of the game, right, to have some Batman elements to it. Because again, when you're playing the game, I was like, it doesn't really feel like a Batman game. But either way, not a knock against the game, right? For what it is, it's definitely an excellent game. That from what I played of it, and what I want to give more of a chance to. But next up is we're going even further back, and this is Galaga. So this game made popular in the arcades, and then eventually went on to like things like the Atari 2600 and I'm sure a lot of those old systems back in the day. And then it's been introduced to in a lot of different compilations right throughout the years, right? And basically Galaga, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I just know that it's so there was Space Invader that came out, back in the day, which was hugely popular, and so there was a lot of games that would try to mimic it or spin-offs of that game. I think that's just kind of like its own thing. Galaga, I don't think it's like a spin-off of Space Invaders. I could be wrong, but it's more or less the same concept, right? You have a ship, you're moving left to right at the bottom of the screen, and you get all these like enemies that are coming down towards you. Only now you're fighting enemy space bugs, but otherwise the same concept. You're just trying to clear out the screen, right, and all to keep advancing. And it's a fun concept. Those games were just a bunch of quarter munchers back in the day, and So if you're looking for like an old school shooter like that, I mean, yeah, Galaga is definitely one of the better ones out there. Certain gameplay mechanics and all, I think throughout the years I've heard that people just tend to prefer more Galaga than Space Invader. And again, it's just probably because it improved on some things from the original formula. But yeah, either way though, again, if you're into old school shooters like this, trying to get a high score at all, this is definitely one of the better games that from that time period there. And next up, we have another Batman game. Only this time, we do got a modern game. Well, modern-ish game here. And this game here, one of my favorite games of all time. It's in my top 10, and that's Batman Arkham City. I absolutely love this game. This game spoke to me in so many ways. And first of all, like I said, I'm a big Batman fan. He's my favorite superhero. And Batman Arkham City was like a love letter to me. I mean, there's so much about this game that I was like completely geeking out over. And again, it had to be one of my top 10 favorite games of all time. So not just because of the Batman license, but well, first of all, let's back up a little bit, right? So in 2009, there was a Batman Arkham City that was developed by Rocksteady, and they just knocked it out of the park with that game, which is also one of my favorite games of all time. Just an incredible game, and it put it got the Batman license, but it made the game in this Unreal Engine 3 graphical style, so meaning that it has a very dark, gritty look to it. But has a lot of the Batman villains in it. It was written by one of the writers of the original animated Batman series, so it kind of feels like that too, also. And then we had the great Kevin Conroy voicing Batman, and then Mark Hamill doing Joker, and then also I forgot her name, but the original actress from Harley Quinn, who she made that character iconic. And just overall, just a great game, great story. Kind of set in a 3D Metroidvania sort of universe. Well, as you're in the Arkham Asylum, and yeah, that game was just absolutely amazing, right? Fell in love with that game. The little knock that I had against it was something I'll just say that the way the story plays out, I guess, right? But other than that, though, right, it's an excellent Batman game, and it definitely made you feel like Batman. Because unlike, for example, like the previous Batman game I just talked about, right, on the Nintendo Entertainment System, now as this game was on the seventh generation systems, you can do a lot more now, right? So meaning that you can explore Batman's variety of gadgets that he has, not only, and then also get to play with him not only as a brawler, right, but then also as a detective, and get to utilize all his skill sets and tool set and all, and then interact with all his rogues gallery, which Batman's rogues gallery is just iconic, right? Definitely probably the best in comic book history. And so and then all the Easter eggs hidden in it. It was just so much joy, right, to play that game as a Batman fan, and it controlled really well, played really well, amazing game. Well, 2 years later, they came out with a sequel, which is this one here, Batman Arkham City, and pretty much improved on a lot of the different aspects of it, right? I mean, there's something to be said about Arkham Asylum, like if you like that one more, because it's kind of more set in an isolated area and all, which I really liked about that. But something about being able to open up Batman's play area right in Arkham City. And so Arkham City is not, what it is that they took Arkham Asylum and then put that in a section of Gotham City. So it's not like the whole Gotham City, it's just like a section of it, right? But it's pretty big though. And so instead of being like a Metroidvania, this game kind of feels, I remember it being compared to like something like Zelda back in the day. And when I'm talking about Zelda, I mean more like think of like Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess or Wind Waker, where you have kind of like a hub world, which is kind of open world, but not quite open world. But then within that hub world, there's a lot of like quote unquote dungeons you can go explore. And then you get certain power ups, right? And all that help unlock other areas, right? So not so much like Metroid, but kind of think more like The Legend of Zelda from those. So not like Breath of the Wild, right? But those older other Zelda games, right? And so that that alone right there, right, being able to explore a bit of open it up, right, and all to the part of the Gotham City was just incredible. You get to meet even more of Batman's rogues gallery, and the story this time plays out really well. No complaints with the story overall, considering how much they crammed into it, right. And then the finale of it and everything I thought was just excellent. And again, right, the same actors come back. Only now this time it was Tara Strong doing Harley Quinn, but she does a really good job as her as well too. And but we still get Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and we get to meet new villains in it like Two Face, Catwoman. We even get to play as Catwoman for a bit, and she controls really well. Overall, just an amazing game. and more moves, just more of everything. Really, it's kind of really like the bigger, badder, better sequel. And the graphics at the time were, I mean, they were really incredible too. It was definitely one of the better looking Unreal Engine 3 games back in the day, and just an amazing time with Batman Arkham City. When I was playing the game, I was like, oh my god, this is just like as a big Batman fan, and I can't find a fault in it. This is incredible, and so yeah, I mean, I had a really fun time with it. Great soundtrack too, also, and yeah, just so much good stuff about this game. One of the best, really cool boss fights, and one of the best boss fights of all time too. Just maybe not so much difficult wise, but very fun though to play as you're trying to figure them out. And that's with the I'll just say a certain chili, um, chili as in cold, villain. But yeah, just an incredible game, and yeah, I think I have it like my, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think it's like I think I have it as my eighth favorite game of all time. And yeah, just absolutely amazing. There's the ones you can play, when they first came out on the 360 and the PS3, and then eventually they got the Return to Arkham remaster. I guess they came out on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Um, which one to play out of those? Mm, some things I like more about the original one. Something I like more about the remastered one. And like, for example, the lighting and all looks better in the remastered one, but something about the character models that I don't know. I feel like I just like the more gritty look of them from like the PlayStation 3 and Xbox One ones. But you can, if you get them on PC though. The nice thing about the PC versions is that you can get it. They look more like the older versions instead of the remastered versions, but you can run those at 60 frames per second. So that's one thing about this series is like they don't. For me, there's not like a definitive edition because I really would want a 60 frames version with the enhanced lighting of like the remastered ones, but maybe more of the character models of the older ones running at 60 frames. But yeah, either way though, whatever version you play, you're gonna have a good time with it. And yeah, just Batman Arkham Asylum. At some point, I'm sure I'll talk about it. Definitely an amazing game. Play that one first, and then be treated to this sequel, which is even more great. Subjectively speaking, right? Of course, right? But I think that's sort of like the overall consensus that people tend to prefer Arkham City more. Either way, though, again, you're getting two great games there with those two. All right, but then moving on to the last one here is for, let's see, I think the name of this one, I think I wrote it down wrong here, but it's World of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. I think that's the actual name. And so we're going back to the Sega Genesis on this one, and another hidden gem on the Genesis. I really enjoyed this game, and it's a game based on from Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. But back in the day though, there was a lot of great Disney games though that were on these fourth generation systems. This one was exclusive to the Sega Genesis, and now I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit from what I said with Sonic Spinball, because this game is another game too that has a bit of a slow movement to it. Like it might be running at 30 frames, I'm not sure, and it has a bit of slowdown and flicker and all. But I think because of the nature of the game, where it's a bit more slower paced than I'll say like something like Sonic Spinball, is why it didn't really bug me as much in this one. But other than that, though, I really like this game. It's basically like a platformer, right? And you control Donald or Mickey, and their attack though is where they'll sort of fling out like a magic cape, right? And as the game is kind of like they're magicians, right? And then they get sucked into this different world. But the level designs are really creative and takes you through a lot of like different Disney cartoons and all, from Donald Duck and also Mickey Mouse, along with some original stuff. And you're fighting I think the main bad guy is what's his name, Brute, or the big beefy goofy looking dude, but not whatever. I kind of forgot his name. But anyways, he's like one of the main bad guys in it, and it's just a lot of fun. Like I said, the level designs are really creative in it. I mean, at one point you'll be going through like a forest, and then another point through like a sunken pirate ship, and then another point I think through like kind of like a desert, like kind of like desert, sort of area, where just like a bunch of sweets and all, or am I thinking of a different game on that? Maybe I'm thinking of Castle of Illusion. But anyways, a lot of creative levels on this one, and a lot of fun. And the other thing too, also about this game that really surprised me, was the music is actually really great as well too. And so again, if you're into Disney games, platforming games, Sega Genesis games, highly recommend this game. It's really great. Again, you would have to resort to emulation. As far as I know, I can't think of another way to play this game, but it emulates really well. And yeah, it's just a great overall Sega Genesis game.
But that's what I got there for Role of Gaming. And so let's get into some modern gaming news here. So we're going to start off a bit of a bummer. It's always unfortunate, right, when something like this happens. But Ubisoft co-founder Claude Guillemot, so he passed away, and it looks like in a plane crash. I don't know much about the plane crash. It's just I just saw the headline and just read a brief article on it. But yeah, it looks like him and some others unfortunately passed. He was at the age of 69. And so it sounds like he's been with Ubisoft. I mean, obviously, right? He was one of the co-founders for a very long time. So was there, during their great years, and there during their this last bit of a turmoil era that they've been in. But either way, though, I'm sure he was behind to some extent, right, on some of our favorite games from Ubisoft, right? Like everything from like the Prince of Persia series to like when they were doing the Tom Clancy games that were really well done, and then the Assassin's Creed games too. At least early on. So yeah, I mean, rest in peace. All right, but let's get into it here now. So there was Sonic had its 35th anniversary. I didn't keep up with it too much, but I did find this article though that I did want to kind of go over here, and that is for so Sega announced some Sonic game collections for the Switch. Um, so let's see. So as part of the Sonic's 35th birthday celebration, Sonic has this week announced not one but two retro game collections. Both collection bundles together previously released titles on the Switch. So first up is a classic Sonic collection for $49.99, and it's launching on the Switch in October of 2026. I didn't quite catch it if it's coming out on the other systems too, but it's just what I saw. But I would assume these would come out on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox. But according to the official PR, this physical edition will include reversible 35th anniversary cover sheet, and the games included are Sonic Origins, and so that's going to be the one that has all the Sega Genesis games. Sonic Mania, so that's one that was done by Christian Whitehead, I believe. That's kind of like an original Sonic game, but kind of takes inspiration from a lot of or levels from the other previous Sonic games. And then Sonic Superstars, which is that more recent 2D side-scrolling Sonic game, but done with 3D graphics, also 2.5D. And then also there's the modern Sonic collection, which is also reported at $49.99 and releasing on October 26th. And so the physical edition also includes a reversible anniversary cover as well. And the bundle includes Sonic Frontiers, Sonic Colors Ultimate, and Sonic Forces. So there's those games there, right? That I haven't played Sonic Colors or Sonic Forces. Sonic Frontiers, it's a bit different. The look of it is kind of odd because it's like Sonic and his friends, right, are very cartoony, but then like the background and all looks very realistic. But I played a bit of it, and I mean, I've had some fun with it. So I'd be curious to continue checking that game out some more. But it'll be on there. And then also looks like Sega Shadow dropped Sonic Frontiers as definitive edition for the Switch too. I don't know much about that one. I think I did see a headline though on a YouTube channel. Someone was talking about it. They said of like how it's a disappointment. So just if you do choose to go out and get it, maybe just read up on some reviews on it. Again, I could maybe it is decent and all. I'm not sure. It's just something that I saw. So just maybe proceed a bit with caution if you do want to check that out. Let's see. But then they also there was also something that I saw too, where Sega's coming out with um, like they're coming out with Sega Genesis cartridges for like they showed like Sonic 2, but I think it's like for $100. I don't know the full story on that. Just something again that I saw real quick. So I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess, if they're wanting to release um, games on cartridges, but that's that's pretty expensive though. So again, proceed with caution on that if it's something that you're wanting to check out. But one thing that I did see though here, this actually let's read up on it here. I saw the headline, but I saved the article here just because I wanted to get more into it because this actually kind of makes me happy, at least the announcement of it. So let's read here. So the headline is Sega hopes to make its entire library of 4,500 games fully playable. So let's see. So this is coming from kitguru.net website. Let's see. So video game preservation is becoming an increasingly important topic. As the industry ages, so does its hardware, and many older titles potentially being lost to time. only being saved by the likes of emulation. In an official capacity, Sega has revealed that the publisher is currently undergoing an ambitious project to make its entire library of 4,500 games fully playable. Taking part in an interview with the Japanese publication Famitsu, Sega saw Yosuke Ikunari, a 30-year veteran at the studio, revealed that he's been working on a rather ambitious project, stating, as translated by the gamer. Quote, for the past few years, I've been working on creating an in-house game database. I still have a long ways to go to complete it, but a search of the current version reveals that, excluding ports and remakes, there are about 2,800 Sega game titles, including all of them. There are about 4,500. So explaining that the long-term goal of this project, Okunari continued, once this database is complete, I'd like to make it fully playable, but I'll probably retire before then, so I'll likely have to hand the work over to someone else. Long-term game preservation is a tough nut due to the evolution of technology over time, perhaps even more so as a result of all the legalese surrounding different game developers, publishers, IP holders, and any other bits of red tape getting in the way. Regardless, hopefully more publishers try to make it an active effort to preserve their history and legacy for the current and future generations. Okay. So I mean that sounds cool. Hopefully he can really make a lot of headway on this, and that's awesome that he's doing that. And then whoever I guess takes up the mantle on that can finish it off here. I mean, it sounds like the project is quite a ways out if it'll ever see the light of day, but that's cool though. I really hope that happens. I talked about it before in a few, actually, I think just in the last episode or two, that Sega Genesis games have gotten a lot of love, and that's great. But Sega has so much more than just the Sega Genesis, like from the Sega Master. Hell, even let's go back to the SG. What is it, the SG 100 or 1000, and then the Sega Master System, and then the Sega CD, the Sega 32X, the Sega Saturn, and the Sega Dreamcast, the Sega Game Gear, right? I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on there too, right? Where it wasn't just a Sega Genesis. So it'd be great, right, if these games are made playable somehow. So hopefully this will, find the light of day at some point, and not only that, but also maybe inspire some of the other publishers and developers out there, right, to also do the same thing with their library of games. But yeah, like I said, video game preservation, it's kind of a tricky one, right? Because we've talked about it before, where it's not just it's the technology that they relied on, right? At the time, that can be a bit difficult. Hell, just even the Sega Saturn emulation, right? It wasn't until just fairly recently, right, where it's at a state where it's pretty, playable. And that's a system from like many years ago, right? So it's just because of the hardware that it was based on. So it's not as easy as like say like restoring movies and music and such. I mean, I'm sure that has its challenges, but I think video game preservation, it's kind of a whole different um, you know, tricky situation there, right, to try to resolve. So, but hopefully, again, that'll happen at some point. A little quick announcement here. So Tekken, so the original Tekken, was announced and kind of shadow dropped that it's available for the modern gaming consoles from that Arcade Archives 2 library of games. So cool. Like I said, I'm all for like releasing older games, right? Even though this Tekken is, hasn't aged the best, but still though, right? It's cool, right, for people to go back and check out, right? Famitsu, so they're that really popular magazine in Japan. They had a survey here recently, and I saw this on a video. This YouTuber was talking about it, and so I just wanted to kind of go over this real quick. But basically, so this was from a post that some dude named Genki, or maybe I don't know, might be a lady, but Genki posted on X or Twitter or whatever it's called. And so basically, Famitsu did a nationwide survey of the games of the game people most wanted to see to get a remake or remaster. So that was about 5,400 people. And so going down the list here, the ones that one of the games that is towards the top actually makes me really happy. But number one is Chrono Trigger. You gotta think this game is right around the corner, right? From what I've been hearing, a lot of these HD 2D remake games, so like the Dragon Quest games, the Octopath Traveler, the Adventures of Elliot, the one that came out recently, and some other games too, like they've been selling pretty decently, right? And also because I think that these games don't have such a high budget to make, it's probably good revenue for them, I would assume, right? So if that's the case, you know, what other games can we, come out in this style, right? And so number one is Chrono Trigger. You got to think like, come on, man, this is like the one that really needs something done on it. I mean, I'd be happy enough if they just gave us the game to buy, right? Put out a, for the physical card collectors and all, put it out on there, put it on digital, and cool. Would it be my best preferred way? But at the very least, if you put it on the Nintendo Switch Online service, right, for the Super Nintendo, Chrono Trigger deserves some kind of re-release of some sort, right? And I mean, I have ways to play the game emulated, so that's why, like I said, if it doesn't come out with an official release, I'm fine. And I do have the version on the DS also. So I would be very open to a HD 2D remake of some sort. So I'm glad that's number one. Seems like it's in the works, but again, we haven't had official confirmation. But that one, again, I have some hope that at some point something will happen with it. But the number two one though makes me happy. Xenogears. Xenogears is a game that I feel that if I had all the money in the world, all the influence in the world, I think one of the first things I would do after trying to world peace and end world hunger and things like that is I would go to Square Enix and say, however you guys need to make this happen, but here's some money, finish somehow Xenogears, right? Finish that disc too, at the very least. If you give me something more than that and more impressive and all, great. At the very least, finish this too. I've talked about it before. Xenogears is one of the most amazing games of all time that just was unfortunately hampered by its development, and they couldn't quite finish the disc 2 in total to the way I'm assuming they would have wanted to. And so disc 2 it's just basically more like text on screen with a little bit of gameplay. It's such an ambitious game, and the story to it is just truly incredible. And it's the game that I would want to have redone again, right? Just because again, the original one was unfinished. There's an argument against like remakes and remasters, right? And I get it. I personally, I don't mind them. I actually kind of like them, and I think it's just because I'm getting older, so I'm just kind of living in my nostalgia now. But I get it though, right? For people that don't want to play remakes and remasters, but that they would just continue to make new IPs, and I get that. That's cool. But Xenogears is one that I feel like would deserve one though, just because a lot of remakes and remasters. I can certainly hear the argument that they don't need to be done just because they already have a good version, right? The older game still holds up really well and all that, right? But it was a complete game. Xenogears wasn't exactly a completed game, right? And that's why I feel that game really deserves it. So hoping this will get things Square Enix to notice, right, and really consider making that. So again, wishful thinking, but it's getting a little bit more of a reality. All right, but then just kind of going through the next ones here real quick. So number 3 was Pokemon Black and White. Number 4 was Final Fantasy VIII, which that'd be cool. But number 5, Tales of the Abyss. Number 6, Persona 2. Number 7, Sakura Wars. Number 8, Final Fantasy IX, which supposedly we were getting, but now it seems like it's been put on ice. Number 9, Dragon Quest IX. Number 10, Final Fantasy VI. That's another one too. Number 11, Bloodborne. Number 12, Persona 1. Number 13, Tales of Eternia. Number 14, Dragon Quest V. Number 15, Shadow Hearts. And number 16, Sengaku Abasara. I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, so that's interesting, right? Again, what I wanted to make mention of that just because seeing Xenogears on there really makes me happy, really makes me feel like people that are into JRPGs and such, right, and all really are kind of hoping for the same thing too. So hopefully that'll happen. All right, but let's get into it here with there's a oh man, video game pricing and things like that. Starting off with the Steam machine, and so they announced their price, right? And so the Steam machine, I think there's a few different variations of this, right? This is just what I jotted down real quick, so I'll try to look something up here as I'm talking here after this. But so the Steam machine came out, and so the two prices that I saw, there's going to be two models. Maybe there's more, but again, these are the two that I saw. $1,049 for a 112 gigabyte one, or $1,428 for the 2 terabyte one. I believe, I could be wrong, but I want to say that I think the 2 terabyte one does come with the Steam controller though. But yeah. I mean, I was kind of anticipating that those were going to be pretty expensive. Okay, here we go. So, oh no, wait. So they both come with the option of Okay, so the lowest price one is a 512 gigabyte no controller. There's a 512 gigabyte one with a controller for $1,128, and there's one with the 2 terabyte one with no controller for $1,349, and then the one with the 2 terabytes with a controller 1,428. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, and then you can be put on a if you want to purchase it on their website, you join the wait list. So kind of like, and then you'll be notified when units become available. So that was kind of like the same thing, right? When the Steam Deck was out. Um, yeah. And from Digital Foundry was doing some testing on it, and I'm sure other people that were able to get their hands on it. From what I understand, it looks like the system it's not as powerful as like the base PS5, and I mean I think they had already kind of announced that and all, but I think the Steam machine was originally meant to be like it was going to be a fairly budget friendly PC that you could get that you can hook up to your TV in a more convenient factor, right? Than like say you can with most other PCs. That was going to be fairly priced, but because of everything going on, right, with the chip shortages and all, and just probably mixed, in with a bunch of greed and all, is why this thing is just incredibly expensive for what it is. Um, I was kind of considering getting it, right? Because I was like, well, this might be like a good emulation device. I've actually kind of reformatted my Steam Deck and just made it more like um, an emulation device, and that along with like modded games also. Like I was recently the other night, I spent some time on there to get a modded version of Final Fantasy IX on there. Modded version of, well, already I had it before, right? But just kind of updated it. The Final Fantasy VII, Seventh Heaven, and then also the Ship Harkanian Zelda game on there, right? Modded. So that's kind of what I'm using my Steam Deck now for. Now, and so originally I thought I was like, if the Steam machine is that I can just have like a really cool emulated device with some games on it, cool, right? Like newer games. But at that price, that's incredibly expensive, and I can't justify trying to buy that. I just no way. Um, and so that's unfortunate. I don't know how this thing is going to do. I don't see this thing. I mean, Valve has a name behind it, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if this still sells out. I wouldn't be surprised by that because again, Valve has, they have a reputation, but that's incredibly expensive, and mm, I don't know. At that price, I don't know. That's insane. Um, they do come with expandable storage via micro SD card, right? Has Wi-Fi 6, no giant brick. The Steam Machine's power supply is built right in. So I mean, it seems like a cool little device, right? Um, but it's the price basically, right? It's the price. It's just incredibly expensive for what it is. So I think that gamers should start preparing themselves for this. Whether if you, and this is why, like I said, another reason why I don't know, I don't think I'm going to continue on, right, going forward with new hardware and all, is because it's outside of like what I've already talked before, right? It's like, I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to put like a cap on as far as like keeping up with the latest and greatest, but the price also. I think that gamers should really start preparing themselves for when like the Project Helix comes out, the PlayStation 6, whatever that's going to be, um, or new PC components coming out too. Also, right? It's going to get expensive. All right, it's going to get expensive, and there's some more stories that I have to touch base on that. Right, that's further proof of that. But here's one of them. Right here with the this Steam machine, it's that's just a lot. It's a lot to justify to try to purchase that. And again, it's not even as powerful as a base PS5. And I know PC tends to be a little bit more expensive, at least on the introductory price, anyways. That to get into it at first than like consoles have been, but because it is a PC also, right? But that's a lot, that's a lot. It's uh, but it's not surprising either, right? But then recently, they had their price increase on the Steam decks, and it's not just Steam Deck or Steam, and that's the thing, right? It's not just one company; it's all of them, and so it's this trend moving forward, right? And all with these consoles and everything, it's just getting just ridiculously expensive, and I do not see this slowing down, right? And again, I got two more examples of that here on this, but this is one of them here, and yeah, it's just if you were looking forward to the Steam machine, if you got the money to spend on it, right? Hey, you do you, man. If you got the money to spend on this, congratulations. You're probably doing okay money wise, right? Or you're incredibly dumb with your finances. And hey, don't get me wrong, I've been there before. But yeah, but it's pretty hard to recommend something like that at that price range, right? If you're just a regular Joe, right? Just out there trying to, you know, work to make a living. You're not rich or anything, and all. It's just that's incredibly expensive. Um, but yeah, that's what the Steam Machine is for. Well, let's get into it now with something else, though. Here, one of the major news that came out for just gaming in general. So we had, so I talked about it last week, right? June 25th was the day that the pre-orders were going to go live for Grand Theft Auto 6. There was going to be a trailer. They were going to announce the pre-orders. That's what I was, predicting, right? Well, they had already announced they were going to announce, that you can pre-order it and all. But I was like, they're going to show off the prices. They're going to release a trailer and all. As I'm recording this on the morning of June 26th, well, I haven't seen a trailer. Maybe right now they just dropped the trailer, right? But I haven't double checked yet. We didn't get a trailer, but we did get a dump truck of information, though, as far as like the pricing and pre-orders and such. And oh boy, it's not all good. Regardless, Grand Theft Auto 6 is gonna sell a mega fucking ton of copies. Well, copies, I should say more digital copies. Oh shit, the thing that happened with this. So Rockstar came out, and so on June 24th, so the day before the pre-orders were going to go live, they dropped a bunch of information. They got this website going. It has a bunch of information on there. It shows a bunch of screenshots and everything. New art working on. All that looks great. I mean, the game looks outstanding, right? As far as like graphically and all, it's like looks amazing. And then some of the things you can start, that you can do in the game, right? All of that looks incredible. But the gist of it, though, is that so it's coming out on June 25th. Oh no, when you're going to be able to pre-order it. Still coming out on October 19th. That's what they're saying. But you're able to preload the game though on November. No, did I say October? No, November 19th. But you're able to preload the game on November 12th. The standard edition is at $79.99, $80 basically. So, yep, they did the $80. I did not think they were going to do 70, right? I was like, they're going to do $80. That just has to be. And sure enough, that's what it ended up being. That's like for the digital version, right? Um, there's an Ultimate Edition that is $99.99 or $100 basically. And that version there, well, it has some stuff on there. I'm not. Let's see. I thought I had a website. Say for this, I don't have it up right now. But basically, the Ultimate Edition, it seems like it has quite a bit of stuff on there, like everything from like a salon to like different vehicles and different outfits and maybe weapons, and so it does have quite a bit of a list of stuff, right? That you're able to access. But it's you have to pay those $20 extra. So I would say that it comes from what I've seen with other Ultimate Editions, anyways. It seems like it comes with substantially more than your typical Ultimate Edition, but it's still all behind this paywall, right? Where you have to pay those $20 extra to get all that. So that's the first oomph right on this. The second one is for the physical version that it's just a code in a box. There's no discs in it. For Grand Theft Auto, they haven't announced how big the game's going to be. I'm going to assume this game is probably going to be it might be pushing 200 gigabytes. I'm not sure, right? I'm thinking it's probably going to be like, it's going to be big, right? So how many discs would that be? 3, 4, maybe? I don't know. But it would take multiple discs, right? Not that it hasn't been done before. It has, right? But it would be pretty big, right? I mean, hell, back in the day, we had what 4 discs on the PlayStation, or even for PC users, right? There was like what 10 discs, right, just to get a game going, or to finish the game all the way through. So it's not like it's never been done before. It's just I think that concept is getting more inconvenient, quote unquote, inconvenient, right, for people now. And God, we're so spoiled now. But yeah, but it's so $100, right, for that, and then it's only a code in the box, right, for so for people that are into physical games, that was, there was a lot of noise online, right, for that. A lot of negative online noise. But the reality is, so, and again, right, and I say it, and I say this, I know, because I guess I'm part of the problem, right, where I'm buying my stuff digitally, right. But the reality is, right, I'm not good or bad or whatever. But the reality is that, like, PlayStation came out with this supposed statistic. Something it said something to the fact that, like, roughly about 80% of PlayStation 5 users buy their games digitally. Okay, and now, I think that the reality for most people, right, is you're either a casual people that are into gaming, right, to some extent. The majority of people are, like, let's say, casual gamers. Okay, meaning that they have a game system, they buy some games, but they're not like hardcore, like, I mean, like me, or, like, let's say, even anybody listening to this, right? I would assume that you're a hardcore gamer, right? Who else would listen to this? But I'm going to assume that you're pretty hardcore into gaming and all. Um, but we're not like the majority, right? And so it's like the same thing with movies and all, right? It's the casual gamers are like, oh yeah, like, oh, Grand Theft Auto, yeah, and so they don't. The numbers speak for themselves, right? It's not going to be the majority of people that want that physical copy, and all. We've. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that everyone has been pretty much, um, whether you want to call it, to trained or brainwashed or whatever, to just buying things digitally now. The convenience that it's a big convenience, right, for a lot of people, right? So that's one thing there, right? That people are like, oh, I don't care about owning it physically. I just want to play the game, like, I just want to play Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm not caring about buying it physically or whatever. I just want it on my system. They're not really thinking about the long term effects of that, right? Are you going to still have ownership of that game, in the years to come down the road, right? And all that stuff. They're not really thinking about that. I just want to play the game. Again, they're casual, right? They're not like, geeks like you and me. Um, so that's one thing. Um, the other thing too is that even for hardcore gamers, right? Like, say, like, I consider myself, as far as, like, because I love this stuff, right? I don't, I'm not so much hardcore as far as, like, me playing games a lot, because I mean, I do play games fairly often, right? But it's just, again, I can't play as games as much anymore. But I'm still definitely involved in this hobby to an extent, which is why I'm doing my little podcast here, right? Who else would do a podcast like this unless you have a love for the video games? And so, but there's a lot of people like me also that, for example, we do love video games, and we have we have a lot of video games. It's just that the reality is that I don't have, like, the space, right, to try to have, like, an area dedicated for just storing a bunch of video games. I did have a decent size physical video game collection, um, and I would say that if the games that I have, all the games that I have, and the ones that have a physical copy available, and if I would have had physical copies of all those games, I mean, that would be a decent amount of games that I would have, right? I mean, almost like, some of those YouTube videos that you see, right, where people are showing off their video game collection. It would be something like that. It's just that I don't have the space for that, right? That's the reality for a lot of people too. I mean, if you have, like, a big enough house, or if you have the means to, like, have, like, a room dedicated for that kind of stuff, right? Great. I don't, and so that's part of the reason, like, I had to get rid of my video game collection, just because I was like, okay, this stuff, it's just, I have to you have to prioritize certain things, right? And so it just got to the point I was like, I can't, like, just, realistically hold on to all this stuff, right? And all, where it's not taking up space for other things that we could be using it for more important things for the house, right? For example, right? That's just the reality of it, and that's, I think, the reality for a lot of people. So therefore, we buy games digitally, and again, I understand the possible repercussions of that, where, again, that these games might not be available forever, and all that. I understand that, right? But that's just part of the reality of it. I have been buying some games physically very slowly, like some of my all time favorites. And, like, the last game that I bought, and I just got it just to kind of have it, but it was the Super Famicom version, so the import version of Final Fantasy VI, right, on the Super Nintendo. Just because there are some games that I do want physical copies of, but it's going to be very limited now. And even with 4K DVDs and Blu-rays and all, there's a handful of movies. My wife actually got me some movies for Christmas last year, for like the physical versions of some movies that are some of my all-time favorites. So that's cool, right? But again, because I also used to have a big movie collection too, and again, I had to get rid of a lot of that stuff, right? Just because I was starting to have them on digital now. So it is just a lot more convenient. I get it. We're probably part of the problem, but I'm also saying that that is part of the reality, and the for a lot of people, right, where we just can't have like a, like a large collection of physical media, basically. Um, but again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, and but I do get it though, because with not just that, it's not just that Rockstar is doing this for Grand Theft Auto 6, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to have a physical copy of Grand Theft Auto 6, and there's a little bit of a caveat to that though, but I'll get that here in a bit. But it's also that because it's Grand Theft Auto 6, and because of, regardless of what you think of the game, it's going to have a massive influence. I mean, we're talking about probably the most anticipated game of all time, probably going to be the biggest entertainment product of all time. I mean, that's not hyperbole to say that. And so meaning that this is going to have a huge influence not only on the people that play it. I'm sure it's going to have controversy one way or the other, right? I think the controversy to this game is going to be one or two things. The typical controversy with Grand Theft Auto games, right? That it's, a lot of violence, a lot of, bad stuff that you can do in the game, right? Or the second controversy, that it's going to be really woke. It's going to be one of the two or the other, right? I almost can't wait to see it. Either way, it's going to crack me up on however it goes. I'm going to judge the game by its own merits, right? But also, not only that, also the influence that it's going to have on the industry as a whole, right? So it's like, oh well, if Grand Theft Auto 6 is doing it, we can get away with this now, right? With either trying to charge $80 games as making it the new baseline for video games, right? Or also, well, like if Grand Theft Auto 6 doesn't have a physical edition, why do I need to do physical editions for now? Because again, remember, physical editions, right, are going they do take up more space, manufacturing costs and whatnot, right? And so as far as like how companies can make more of a profit on, right, it's going to be from digital, right? It's not so much from physical. Then, and that's just again the sad reality of it. But because again, it's Grand Theft Auto 6, they're going to be able to get away with it more, right? Where at least more companies are going to be tempted to do it, to get away with it. And so meaning that for future game releases, I'm sure a lot of physical game collectors, right, that's one of their concerns, is that you know, if a game as influential as Grand Theft Auto 6 is doing this, what does that mean for the industry going whole? Is this the final nail in the coffin, right? For what's already been anticipated to be an all digital future, this is like, yeah, like we're here. It's like it's not a theory, it's not anything else, it's here, right? And I do feel that could be true. And it sucks, right? Again, I'm not, even as someone that buys my games digitally and all, I can understand that, right? Because I understand that, the possibility of us continuing to play these games, what happens in 20 years from now, my PlayStation 5 finally dies out, and that's where I had my copy of Grand Theft Auto 6 stored on, and then I'm trying to find another PS5, right, to play it on, or anyways, right? So I completely understand all that. But yeah, it's crazy. But there was something though. There was like a retailer, I think, or somebody stated though that they had heard or they saw something announced, or I don't know to what extent, but that basically Grand Theft Auto 6 will be getting a physical copy or version to come out sometime in December. So if that's the case, what gives, right? So what Rockstar has come out saying is that the reason why they're doing, why they're not doing physical copies already is because of the fear of like leaks getting out there. Uh, you know, I I can kind of understand that in a way because it is Grand Theft Auto 6. You want to protect this game as much as possible without leaks getting out there. Because usually when there has been leaks of a game, it's usually been because there's been like a physical copy that came out. Somehow that physical copy gets out in the wild. People get their hands on it. People dump it online. Leaks go out there, right? And then the game is spoiled before people actually get their hands on it, right? Before the actual retail release. So there is that, and I get it, right? Grand Theft Auto is one of the biggest games out there, so I can imagine they want to protect that as much as possible. But I kind of call bullshit on that though too. Also, it's like how much damage is that really going to do for something like Grand Theft Auto fucking 6? It's I don't think it would do that much damage. All right, people are going to buy this game regardless, and it's not a good. They're only going to buy it. They're going to buy it in mass droves, right? I mean, I'm telling you, we're going to look we're going to see something like the scale that we've never seen before, really, when it comes to video game sales. At least that's what I'm thinking, right? Maybe the thing flops. I don't know. But I highly doubt that, though, right? So I don't think that it would do that much damage, right? And then the other thing, too, also is like, okay, so if you're doing, because they're doing this physical version where it has a code in the box. And I don't know if that's just for the standard version or if it's for the Ultimate Edition. I didn't quite catch that. But if you're doing that, and then and then you do have a physical version, a few weeks later, that does seem kind of like a dick move, right? Um, so just FYI, if you are someone that wants to get into Grand Theft Auto 6, but you're someone that wants a physical copy, you know, before you spring forward on buying the one with the code in the box, just maybe keep your eye on the news and see if that ends up being true, where there will be a version that comes out on sometime in December, right? That actually has the actual discs. So just FYI on that, right? Maybe kind of hold off on that and um, to see maybe if you just rather wait a few weeks, right, and all to get it then. So that way you're not double dipping and all, right? But yeah, that was a whole lot of Grand Theft Auto stuff that came out. Grand Theft Auto 6, and again, no trailer too. There was no trailer. I was like, there's got to be a trailer, but apparently not. I heard they're doing their market. This is just my theory. I don't know for sure, but I feel like within the past 5 years or so, the way that companies have been doing their marketing, even movies and such, it's different now. Where like it almost seems like they're influenced a lot because of social media now, or even like leakers and things like that, where it's like they're almost like trying to trick us, right? Like say like, that's when you thought we were gonna do the trailer, not quite, but then like 2 to 3 days later, there it is, like, and again, I don't know this for sure. It's just my conspiracy theory. But like, for example, what happened with Star Fox? It's almost like Nintendo got upset that it was leaked out there, and so then they're like, "All right, fuckers, you want to play that game? We're not going to show the trailer of it." But then, like a few days later, in the next month, they did, right? And so it's almost like they're playing games and all, or just to try to like trick us or keep us on our toes. Which I don't know if that's effective or not, or if it's necessary or not. That's just the feel that I get. But I was like, why wouldn't you show a trailer? It seems the most convenient time to do a trailer. You're announcing your pre-orders. I mean, I can imagine that they were expecting a lot of backlash because of the pricing and all. But I was like, okay, so maybe you release, you give all this information one day, let the backlash get out there, right? Fucking Rockstar, you motherfuckers, this and this and this, right? And all. And then after that, I was like, yes, yes, I know. I hear you. I hear you. I hear your hate. I hear your hate. Here's the trailer though. And then people are like, oh my God, this looks like the greatest thing ever. And then everyone just shuts the fuck up about the prices, right? That's what I was thinking was going to happen, but apparently not. At least as of the time I'm recording this, maybe they dropped the trailer already. I'm not sure. But I'll try to keep my eye on it and see if that trailer gets announced here soon.
But there is a thought, though, on where this might all go. And, I'm going to get into it here with something else, too. Is I was just talking about, like, prices going up on everything. And again, I don't know just how much, at least for like the casual person, right, truly understands like what effect this is going to have, Grand Theft Auto 6, right, just on the gaming industry as a whole. And because again, everyone's looking towards this game, right? But the thought that I kind of have, and I don't know to what extent, right, but with everything going on with the price increases, this whole fiasco going on with Grand Theft Auto 6, and then what influence that's going to have on the market going forward, right, with the video game market, is Grand Theft Auto 6 going to be, quote unquote, the next ET? Okay. And I say ET in quotations, right? And by that, I mean, is Grand Theft Auto 6 going to be sort of the game that ends up actually causing some form of a crash, right, to the industry? And now, ET wasn't necessarily responsible for the crash itself. I going back to my podcast, I think from 1983 in the years in gaming, I kind of go over there on what truly caused the crash of that. But the reason I say that though is because ET was it was a game that was, they developed a whole bunch of copies for it, right? And ultimately the market was already just saying no to a lot of like bad games and then so many games being produced. But it wasn't just ET's fault, right? I mean, there was a lot of other stuff going on that, that caused it to crash, but ET kind of gets blamed for it a lot. And so that's sort of like when people think of the video game crash of 1983, they immediately think of that ET game. And also to an extent, the Pac-Man game from Atari, which again, they weren't specifically the cause of the crash, but they're the ones that kind of get blamed for it. So is Grand Theft Auto 6 going to be that game, right? For this version of the crash that we're kind of going through? I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be done like in exactly the same way as back then, right? Because again, things are different. The way games are distributed is different and all. But there could be something that happens though, right? Where something is going to burst because of just the effect that this is going to have. I mean, the power that this game has where, almost no games are being released like almost a month before, and then almost no games being released like about a month afterwards, right? Just to sort of avoid that it'll be interesting to see what happens. Again, just like back then, right? If there is some form of a crash, it doesn't mean that like video games are going to disappear all of a sudden. But I think that there's going to be a pretty significant I should say there could be a significant change as to just the layout of the industry overall. I feel like, and I'm not saying this like I'm wishing this to happen or it will happen or anything like that. It's just kind of looking like, there's a lot of things going on that you kind of get the feeling like something's going to pop here soon. All the layoffs, all the things going on, the intensity of the release of this game and so many different factors that it just kind of seems like something somewhere is going to burst. And let alone again, right? Again, without getting too much into real world politics and all, but the state of the world as well too, right? The economy and everything, just people's living conditions or living not living conditions, the way people need to get by and all, right, with what they're choosing to spend their money on. A lot of people are just not resorting to like luxuries like this. And granted, Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to sell incredibly well, but what is that going to do just for everything else going forward, right, with the industry? Because sure, that's going to put a lot of revenue into it, but what else is going to survive, I guess, and who knows, right? It'll be interesting to see what happens, but just some things I was thinking about that, is this, are we heading towards something where, many years later, we're going to look at Grand Theft Auto 6 to be sort of that catalyst of that led to some kind of disastrous event that happened, again, right. With how ET and Pac-Man get blamed for back in the day. We'll see. I mean, again, only time will tell, but it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, it's it's amazing. It's crazy, and it's almost unfair, like just how much influence this game has. It's just crazy. But let's move on though from Grand Theft Auto 6, and so moving on over to Switch news. And so don't have a whole lot here to talk about the Switch, but did want to mention a little bit about. So part of what I do here also is not necessarily just video game news, but also if I've been playing something that's somewhat recent and just giving some thoughts on it. And so there's going a little bit into my personal situation here. Had a doctor's appointment and, it's got some information, nothing major, but there's some things that you really start taking precaution on. And so long story short, I really need to start trying to eat better and also get back in some kind of shape, right? And so unfortunately, my job, it's a very sit down job. So as much as I can, like during my breaks and all, I try to move around as much as I can and all just to try to get some steps in. And so I've been doing a lot better on that. And so I'm averaging now from like around, 6,000 to 7,000 steps or so a day, and just trying to work my way up from there. Well, so I have a bit of a hybrid position though, where some days I work at the office and then other days I work from home. And so the days that I work from home, I've been trying to get a bit creative, right, on just how I can move around a bit more and all. And so in my office, I have a TV and then I also have my Switch plugged in. And so some years ago, I bought the Ring Fit Adventure for the Switch. Figured I'd buy it, maybe, try to kind of like a fun way, right, to get a little bit of exercise in. And I thought maybe my girls might get into it. That was a few years ago, and I tried it a few times, and I thought the concept was pretty neat, but never really got into it a little bit further. Well, now, like I said, I have the Switch here in the room now, and so I have like the ring thing that it comes with, and then the leg bracelet and all. And so, yeah, so what I've been doing is when I just want to take like a quick little break, I just do like one of the little courses that it has. It's like 2 to 3 minutes long, and just kind of do that periodically right throughout the day as I'm working. And it's been a fun way actually to get some steps in, get a little bit of movement going in and all. And I'm surprised actually how much resistance that ring thing has, because it has you push it in or pull it out depending on whatever exercise it's having you do. And it's pretty cool. I will say that it is a bit fun, and so it's been a fun way for me to get some movement in right during my work hours as I'm working here from home. And so hopefully I'll continue to use that there, and it's been pretty fun. So I would say that if you've never played something like that before, definitely it would worth checking out if you want to try to incorporate like some kind of exercise into your gaming. And that's it's a fun little game, and it runs pretty well, right? It has a multitude of like things that you can do, right? Like different kind of exercises, or you can program it also, like if you just want to target a specific body part, or just do like a quick little easy raise, or they get a little bit harder, and it has you do everything from squats to like an ab twist and a variety of different exercises. But then it also has like this adventure mode, which I haven't really gotten into yet, because again, I've just been doing like these quick bursts, right? And all here and there throughout the day. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun thing to get into. And, if you just want to get some movement in. But the other thing too I wanted to talk about here on the Switch too is we're just Switch in general, but this is for Star Fox. And so the game came out, and the game has gotten decent reviews overall. Actually, as I'm talking about it here, let's look up to see just what exactly the Metacritic is on this as of right now. But I did end up getting the game, and I do enjoy it. I think it's great. It definitely seems a lot more almost like a 101 to the original one, to the Star Fox 64, because again, this is sort of like a remake of that game, but it's still definitely a lot of fun. And and so I would say that if you're into these kind of games, where what I mean by that is that I personally don't mind it, like I said, right? And I can still go back to like games like the way they were back in the day. And actually, a lot of times I can kind of prefer that and still feel like I got my money's worth, right? The game is $50, so you're not spending, 60 or 70 or 80. But I know that nowadays, right, for some people that might be a lot of justify for a game that's, it's not that long, and it's just really, it does have some game modes to it, right, that you can go back to. But other than that, it's just basically like an on-rails arcade shooter when it comes down to it. And so I don't know if that justifies the price for a lot of people out there. But for me, like I said, I come from that era, and the point of the game is that it's fun. It's very replayable, it's exciting, and you definitely get a lot of entertainment value out of it. And so again, it's not necessarily the length of the time of a game, it's just how quality it is. And so I think that these games can still find a place in this video game industry, because if you're charging, now again, $50 used to be the standard for game prices, right? Well, not necessarily for the Nintendo 64, because I know that those games were more expensive back then. But anyway, at one point, $50 was sort of like the standard, right, for a lot of games. But then we went up to 60, 70, and now we're pushing towards 80. But I feel like, okay, if you're going to do these $70 games, right, and these are going to be the more expansive games and all, then, there is a market, I believe, for people that just want kind of like shorter experiences. And if you can charge cheaper for them, then I think that they can find their place, right, in this industry. And so hopefully this game finds success. It is again, I can understand that, it is just another remake, right, of Star Fox 64. That game's already been redone a few times. And so, but it definitely looks, the visual leap though from other previous attempts to remake it's quite considerable. Again, it does have some new modes. I haven't messed around with all of it, but it has like mouse control if you're into that, and cutscenes expand the story on it a bit more. And so overall, it's a great package. So I guess it just comes down to, do you mind playing another remake of Star Fox 64? A really well done one, but it's still a remake, right? And so again, that'll be depending on your mileage of this game. And so I would say that if you've never played a Star Fox game, or especially Star Fox 64, then absolutely yes, right? If you have played Star Fox 64, then I guess it comes down to how much did you like that game, right? Or do you like it enough that you would give a remake a try, or are you just kind of burnt out on the game, right? And so again, that would be up to you there. And I kind of wish, I mean, I definitely would have wished if they would have made like a brand new Star Fox, but still in the vein of like Star Fox 64, like that style, not try to do anything too gimmicky and all like they've tried to do with other Star Fox games, but just like another, solid on-rail shooter, but brand new. That would have been cool. Or if you were going to remake one, why not the first one? Right? I mean, that game, it was incredible for its time, but it definitely hasn't aged the best, right? And so that would have been a good template there, right, to remake a game. But, they went with Star Fox 64. And I get it. I mean, nowadays, the way things are, there are, companies doing a lot of safe bets and all. And, how well would like a brand new Star Fox game really have done? Who knows, right? But, it's interesting, though. But what's interesting also is as I'm playing this, there's definitely a lot of changes to it, right? But it's still at core the same game. And so it gets me thinking about The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It's like, yes, I know that little snippet that we saw, definitely seems like they're doing something drastically different. But are they, though? Is it going to be more of a one-on-one? Like maybe the cinemas are going to be very different. But when it comes down to like the core gameplay, the overall experience, yes, it's going to look better. It's going to be expanded on and all, but it's still at heart pretty much the same game, So I kind of wonder if it's going to be something like that. Again, time will tell, right? I'm still gonna anticipate, from what people have been saying and all, and it seems to make sense that it would be sometime in August that we would get to see some more information on The Legend of Zelda, and I think what people are speculating on that is that excuse me, Splatoon Raiders comes out in July, and so that seems Nintendo tends to sort of like spread out not only their games but also their advertisement for games, right, and kind of hone in on one specific game for around its release window. And so that's why we're thinking that it's probably not going to be in July, because again, they want to probably dedicate that more to Splatoon Raiders. But then August, would seem to make sense, but we'll see, but then again, I think Fire Emblem is coming out in August. I'm not sure. But anyway, it just seems like that's going to be it. I mean, I definitely would wish it would show something sooner, because that was just too much of a tease, right? I know what they showed at the Nintendo Direct. It's like, we want to see more. We just, we kind of want to see what this game's all about. But at the same time, they might be also trying to time it when they start doing their marketing for the movie too, because the movie comes out in April of next year, if I recall. And so, the marketing for that's going to start coming out here soonish, right? So maybe they want to tie it in with that too. Then maybe do like a big old, Zelda Direct. My personal wish list for the Direct, a Zelda Direct, which I know is not going to happen, but show us the trailer for the movie, right? Because I'm actually really interested in that movie. Of course, show us The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, right? Like give us the whole shebang, right? Or the whole, what does it say? I was teaching this to my daughter the other day. I was like, I don't know what it means, but the whole kit and caboodle, it's like the whole, I imagine it's like show us everything, but I don't know, like, I guess the origin of where that saying comes from. And then shadow drop like the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker Twilight Princess, even if it's, just like the HD version, right? That came out on the Wii U. I'd be happy enough with that, but I know that won't happen, but would be cool though. But yeah, I'm going to anticipate August. So not too far off, right? But still, it's a little painful to wait, just because again, that tease that we got was they barely showed anything. So it's like, come on, guys, But here we are waiting still. All right, but that's just what I got for the Switch. And so moving on over to Xbox. And so this is where the other downer of a news comes in. And so speaking of price hikes, right? Xbox, this is crazy to say because they've already done it a few times within the past, year or so, but they are raising the prices again on the Xbox consoles. So I saved this little article here. So let's just kind of check this out. I saw the headlines to this, but I haven't read the article. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and peel the Band-Aid off and see what's going on with Xbox. All right, so this is from their official Xbox page. So, and this story was posted on the 25th, so 2 days ago. So effective August 1st of 2026, we will be updating prices worldwide. The price of Xbox consoles will increase by $100 for 512 gigabyte models and $150 for the 1 terabyte models. We will also be sunsetting our 2 terabyte model. So that 2 terabyte one didn't last very long, right? Like, wasn't it even a year that model lasted? But last October, we increased console price by $20 to $70 in the US. We hoped another price increase would not be necessary, and we spent the last several months working with suppliers on options. Unfortunately, console storage and memory prices have increased by more than 2.5 times, and we expect this is what's crazy. We expect another doubling by the fall of 2027. The entire consumer electronics industry is struggling with the current component crisis, but the effects are particularly hard on consoles. Unlike phones, computers, speakers, and other consumer devices, consoles are typically not sold at a profit, but instead for less than they cost to make. So, meaning that this is only going to, this is very likely that prices are going to continue to increase. But today we are also sharing programs to make Xbox consoles more accessible. So there's the option for buy now, pay later. We made it easier for players to use buy now, pay later options on eligible Xbox hardware purchases through Microsoft stores, making it possible to break up your payments into predictable short-term interest-free installments. Well, at least there's that, I guess. Interest-free financing. We are working with partners to let players purchase eligible Xbox hardware at 0% APR financing for up to 12 months, giving players more flexibility and lower monthly payments and more budgeting control. Previously played consoles. We are working with retail partners on new programs to provide previously played consoles at lower prices. Players who are ready to upgrade or no longer use their console will be able to trade it in at participating retail partners for cash or store credit. Those consoles will then be made available at lower prices for the player. Certified refurbished consoles. So Xbox certified refurbished consoles are available at Microsoft stores for up to $100 off MSRP. So the Xbox Series S remains the lowest way for console players to enjoy the biggest hits this year, including Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, Resynced. Well, that comes out here in July, I believe, right? Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4, Gears of War E-Day, Grand Theft Auto 6, Halo Campaign Evolved, and Madden 27. So, yeah, let's see. Where are the prices, though, actually? That doesn't really go over the prices, though. So let's see if I can find it here. Okay, here we go. So according to Skynet, so the Xbox Series S, so the 512 gigabyte model, is going up to $499.99, up from $399.99. The Xbox Series S, the 1 terabyte model, is going up to $599.99. So that's up from $449.99. That's a jump of $150. The Xbox Series X digital 1 terabyte model is going up to $749.99. So that's up from $599.99. So again, that's another $150 jump. And the Xbox Series X 1 terabyte with the disc, that's $799.99, going up from $649.99. That is absolutely bonkers. Wow. And there could be I would think that there's a lot of, I know that these companies are very greedy and all, right? But at the same time, I do think that there is potentially a lot of truth to what they're saying as well, too, that, the hardware is just more, usually, because that's always usually been the case, that the consoles are sold at a loss and they make up their difference, right, through like software sales. And, usually that's been the case, right, with like Xbox and Sony. I think Nintendo kind of gets away with that, which is why they usually make their systems not the most powerful out there, right? Because they do get some profit from their consoles and also their games, is my understanding with Nintendo. But like Sony and Microsoft is kind of the opposite, right? They make up their sales through their games. And so, that's But I guess we'd have to. I mean, I know that the Xbox isn't selling that well. I think I heard somewhere that it's selling roughly at about 25. There's been like 25 million units sold, give or take, where the PlayStation 5 is now like at 100 million or so. But I guess that'd be interesting to see just how much more profit are they making since these price increases, which leads to another story. And let's see if I can find this one here, because again, I just saw the headline here. PS5 and Xbox sales. Okay, here we go. So this is from IGN here. So the PlayStation console sales fell to their lowest May total in 26 years following PS5 price rise. The Xbox hardware sales were also the lowest ever recorded for a May month. So again, and that's what I'm saying, right? Everything's kind of leading to this. It feels like it, right? Like everything's leading to this inevitable. Your prices are all of a sudden just spiked, right? We talked about the Steam machine, the Steam Deck a little while ago. Nintendo's getting a bit of a price hike too. We'll see how long that lasts, or they can hold off, right? With just increasing the price to what is it, $500? I think in September. The PS5 raised their prices, somewhat recently. We talked about that a few episodes back, and now the Xbox is raising their prices, right? And so then what we're seeing is that in the month of May, it was the lowest recorded console sales for the PlayStation since I think 2000. We'll get into it here in a bit, and of all time for the Xbox. So May was a catastrophic month for PlayStation and Xbox sales in the U.S., driven by price rises that have certainly had a significant impact on consumer interest in buying a new console. So Sony raised the price of the PS5 console in April, bringing the cost of a standard PS5 to $649.99, the PS5 Digital Edition to $599.99, and the PS5 Pro to $899.99. Those price rises appear to have dented the PS5 sales in the US in May, when, according to a new Circania data, PS5 spending fell 43% year on year and unit sales plummeted 58%. Xbox didn't do much better. Surprisingly, Xbox Series hardware spending actually grew 7% versus a year ago, but unit sales fell by 12%. That's the result of Xbox Series costing more in May versus the previous May. Microsoft increased the price console by $20 to $70 in the US last October. So Matt Piscatella, senior director of video games at Circana, said PlayStation hardware units fell to their lowest May total since May of 2000. So May of 2000. So what was happening in May of 2000? The PlayStation 2, at least I know it wasn't out here in the States yet, because that came out in October of 2000. It was either right around the corner or it had just released in Japan. I'm not sure, but so that would have been the play. So basically, I think they're talking about like the PlayStation 1 console, right? So that was at the very end of the PlayStation's lifetime, right? Because the PlayStation 2 was right around the corner, and so meaning that this is the lowest that it's ever been for PlayStation hardware to sell since then. Let's see, so that seems pretty terrible for Sony. Meanwhile, Xbox hardware unit sales were the lowest ever recorded for a month of May. So bad all around. Hammering home the point that getting into console gaming has become more expensive, Circana said that the average price paid for a new unit of video game hardware reached $502 in May, up 14% compared to a year ago, which was $440. May of 2026, PS5 average pricing increased by 33% versus a year ago to $672, with the Xbox Series up 22% to $524. Traditionally, consoles get cheaper over the course of a generation, not more expensive. Microsoft announced another Xbox Series price rise this week. We just talked about that. So although it doesn't come into effect until August, I can't imagine those September Xbox sales are going to be particularly healthy. If that's what happened in May, if what happened in May is anything to go by. So the price rise are the direct result of the RAM apocalypse, as they're calling it, which is an ongoing global memory shortage and price crisis driven by semiconductor manufacturers reallocating their DRAM and NAND production capacity to high-margin hardware for AI data centers. So last October, we increased. So this is a quote. So last October, we increased Xbox console prices by $20 to $70 in the U.S. Microsoft said when it announced Xbox price rises this week. We hoped another price increase would not be necessary. Okay, so we already read all that about the storage prices increasing and all. So let's see. When Sony hiked the price for PS5, it blamed it on continued pressure in the global economic landscape. It's a similar story for pretty much every hardware manufacturer around. Just look at Valve's Steam Machine. When will this console price end? No time soon, reports indicate. Microsoft expects another doubling of console storage and memory price by the fall of 2027. Fingers crossed for 2028 then. Yeah, so, and that's what we're getting at, right? It's this is not good. This is going to continue on, right? There's reports that Sony is still delaying the PlayStation 6, which seems to be the good thing. Who knows what Microsoft will end up doing with this Project Helix, because on one end, it's like at some point you have to release it, right? But then on another end, because if you keep waiting, there's no guarantee, right, that these prices are going to go down or not. So you just might as well just release it, but with everything going up and all, and that's what I'm saying, right? Something seems inevitable that something's going to happen. So, well, it'll be interesting to continue following this story to see what does end up happening. But it's no joke. I mean, we're definitely, and again, it's not just with video game consoles and all, it's with a lot of different things. Now, video games specifically, like they did mention, right, and are impacted because, again, right, it's priority seems to go to like things like cell phones and whatnot when these for the demand for these chipsets. But I don't know, we're definitely heading into an interesting time with a lot of this electronic stuff and all, and just in general, everything with AI. We've talked about that a lot before, but it's a very unpredictable future we're heading in. And so right now, I mean, as far as for your gaming needs and all, and again, this is ultimate to luxury, right? So if it comes down to it, I would hope that we would just rather spend money on the necessities, right? Our bills and all, which, again, that's a whole other thing. But there's a lot of ways you can still continue getting into gaming without getting into the latest and greatest. There's a lot of great little emulation devices out there, right? If you want to start looking at your backlog and playing a lot of games from there, not necessarily where you're playing the latest and greatest. I mean, you can go back to like way back in the day, right? And all for games, part of why I'm doing this, right? Go back and listen to some of the Years in Gaming retrospectives that I've done. And as I, talk about a lot of incredible games that came out through the many years back then. And so it would be a good time to pick up on it. And also, I would also, I know it's going to sound maybe wrong, but also encourage emulation at this point, right? Because also getting into retro gaming, right? That's another whole other story, right? Well, that's expensive in itself, but emulation is a great way to get into video games. And again, a lot of these games aren't even released for retail, right? So that's why I don't personally feel bad when emulating some of these games. And, you're going to find that there's just an incredible amount of games that have been out there that have been released in the years past. Again, on my YouTube channel, I also have like all the games on there on my shorts, right? Trying to kind of put an emphasis on just games all from across various genres. And so you can go through there, scroll, see if there's a game that interests you, right? Find a way to play it, and boom, there you go, you're set, right? Where you don't have to like always look forward to the latest and greatest. There's a lot of great stuff that I'm sure is coming out, right? Obviously, Grand Theft Auto 6, all the games that we talked about earlier, right? That came out during these game showcases earlier. September and October are absolutely stacked with games and all. And then there's Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, there's Grand Theft Auto 6, and then there's Final Fantasy VII Revelation. Those are games that I'm really looking forward to, right? And there's a lot of great stuff still coming out afterwards, right? And that's the crazy thing, is that there's been a lot of great games that have came out this year, right? It's like, wow, this is actually leading up to be an incredible year. But it's what's happening behind the scenes, though, is the kind of part that's a little, concerning, right, with what's going to happen with this industry. And so we'll see, right? Like I said, I'll try to keep on top of it as much as I can, but we're definitely heading for some unknown time. But I would say, like, again, right, with everything getting so expensive, and if you still want to, continue gaming, right? Because especially in these kind of uncertain times, and again, I'm not just talking about video games, just everything in general, it definitely helps to keep yourself grounded somehow with whatever it is that you're into, right? Not necessarily video games, but anything that you're into that is, as low cost as possible, right? Go out, do some workouts, go take care of yourself as best as you can. And I'm learning that right now with what I'm trying to do with my health right now, where I'm trying to get back in shape and all. And I'm starting to appreciate things like that again. And, getting myself in shape again and all. And, take care of your family, yourselves and all, and those people around you, or whatever you got around you, right? Your pets and everything. And just try to, like, kind of hunker down a little bit, right, for the inevitable whatever ends up happening. And ultimately, I'm still a believer, right, that we're all going to be fine eventually. We come out of this. I mean, it's not the first time that humanity has faced like some kind of like a major crisis of some sort. By no means, but it's definitely tough out there. It's no joke. It's definitely tough out there. I've said before, like with what I do in my job, I talk to people all the time about just what we're all dealing with here, right, with finances and everything, and it's no joke. I mean, it's where people are really struggling, and so a lot of times in those moments, right, it does help to have something that help to ground you, right. So that's sort of the things that I just mentioned, right, by taking, doing some self-care, taking care of yourself, working out, doing whatever it is you need to do, right, to get your mind off of things. Video games is a big thing on that as well too, and it's one of the things that has grounded me a lot for the many years, that I've been on this planet. And I mean, I can go back to like from when I was a kid all the way till now, and there's I think about like a lot of stressful times that I've been through, and one of the main consistent things that has been there for me right throughout this whole time has been gaming. And it's something that just keeps me grounded. It takes my mind off of things, and at least for a moment, right, I can feel like there's kind of make sense of this crazy world. And I know that sounds crazy, right, with just some pixels on the screen that can do that, but again, we all find our ways, right, on sort of how to ground ourselves. And, I know I have video games to thank a lot for that, as all these crazy years that I've been on this planet now for, 46, going on almost 47 years now. So, but that's just my little advice on that, right? Because, it's going to get crazy. But moving on from that, though, let's get into here. So already talked a bit about PlayStation stuff there with that article that I read there, but wanted to make mention also and put a highlight on this game here for Split Fiction. Split Fiction is actually it's pretty good. It's a really good game. My wife and my daughter started getting into it, and because they really liked It Takes Two, and so I had bought that game. I think I mentioned it on one of my episodes, right? I bought it some time ago, and so they've been playing it. And so like yesterday I came back home from work and they were playing it, and they've gone pretty far into it. And so then I kind of took over some of the areas were a little challenging for my daughter. And so I would take over and help her out on some segments. And I gotta say, this game is actually pretty incredible. What I love about it is that it mixes two things that I really like, two of my favorite settings. And that's like a really high fantasy sort of setting, where we're talking about like dragons and wizards and castles and, and very fantasy like stuff, but also very sci-fi kind of cyberpunk stuff. And so the way you sort of go between these worlds, right, it's pretty cool. It's what I understand of the story. And it's funny because I didn't start off from the beginning playing this game. And then when I'm playing it, my daughter always wants to skip the cutscenes, right? She's like, I just want to play. And I'm like, I'm missing out on what's going on in the story though. But my understanding is that, so you play these two girls or these two ladies, and so they're like these fiction writers. One of them writes fantasy novels and the other one sci-fi. And so somehow in some kind of like a matrix sort of way, they get sort of like sucked into their worlds through some kind of like, I don't know, I'm thinking kind of like the Matrix, right? Or Tron or something like that. And so you're trying to escape from this world. It's sort of my understanding. But yeah, I mean, the areas that I've seen are really clever. Like we just fought this dragon boss fight, right? I thought that was pretty incredible. And then also there was another area too where you're escaping this some kind of like a facility out in the ocean, and there's like this big old octopus, right, that helps you escape. I was like, holy crap, the set pieces on this are pretty outstanding, and it just keeps going and going, and the way the gameplay keeps evolving, right, and makes it it's kind of like It Takes Two, where it's very easy to get into. Challenging, but a lot of fun. It is more challenging than It Takes Two, but it's a lot. It's been a lot of fun. And so these games, this Hazelight company, I think they're some of the better developers out there. And what I like about it too, also, is that it puts the emphasis on multiplayer too. I kind of wish that there was a one-player mode in it, just because, it's fun to play with my daughter, my wife. We're having a fun time playing it. But I kind of want to see like what happens in the story and all. And like I said, right, my daughter just go like push, because in the game to skip a cutscene, both players have to push the circle button on the controller, and on the PS5. And so then if both of them do it, then it skips the cutscenes. And so she's holding her circle button right away, and she's like, "Come on, Dad, push the circle button." but it's still a lot of fun though. Highly recommend the game. If you have someone to play with, and it's available on also. It's not just on the PlayStation 5. It's also available on the Xbox and on the Switch too as well. But yeah, highly recommend it. But then another bit of a downer here, right? Also, going with continuing on with these sob stories, and that's for Bungie, who they had a massive layoff as well too. And let's see, I believe I say something on this here. So Bungie came out and announced, right? So with great sadness, we are announcing a reduction in forces as we recognize Bungie. As the leaders of Bungie, past and present, we recognize Destiny 2 fell short of expectations these past several years. Following our final content update to Destiny 2 with our future projects still in early incubation, excuse me, we unfortunately could not continue operating at our previous size. Excuse me. We know this decision has had a profound impact on the people affected, their families, friends, and teammates. While these changes are necessary to best position the studio now and for the future, that does not lessen the difficulty of this moment of the impact to those affected. Later, we will share more about the future with you, but today is not that day. Today, we wish to extend our gratitude and compassion to every member of the Bungie team who has been impacted and to those who remain. We hope you will do the same. Bungie. So yeah, blah, 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 PR speak, right? Yeah, and I mean, I don't know for sure, but it kind of seems, again, it's coming from decisions made from top management that the PlayStation just, PS5 just wanted to get into this whole live service stuff, right? And so Bungie was kind of the king of that for a while, with the Destiny and Destiny 2. And then they came out with Marathon. And from my understanding, Marathon isn't doing too healthy as well. And so, again, everything's kind of leading to this inevitable, right? So many things happening, and I feel like something's just going to give at some point. I mean, like I said, I feel bad for like the people that do get let go, especially in these, unpredictable times, economic wise. But it's just some of the decisions that they made. And I don't know, during the height of when there was a lot of demand for these live service games, let's just say like if these companies didn't try to focus on those kind of games and try to make more single player focused games, right? So for example, had Rocksteady done another Batman style game or some kind of like a single player game, had the developers of Highguard, had they tried something else that wasn't live service, had the developers of Concord, right, did something else, who knows, maybe we would have been in a different position, but because we did go this route, right, it certainly hasn't been pretty. And so, again, hopefully they find some kind of employment down the road, and hopefully this is a lesson learned, I guess, for the industry. But another thing too, also here, kind of just a bunch of bad news. I'm trying to find like happy articles, and there's some stuff out there, but a lot of the major stories are just kind of downers. So, but this one here, so this affects, from my understanding, the PlayStation version of Halo. And so, let's see, I'm trying to pull up this article here. Okay, but there's been some updates here on this story here. So this is for Halo Campaign Evolved. So it looks like there's been some recent updates though on this. So let's go over this here. So originally the story was Halo Campaign Evolved split screen co-op on PS5 will not require PlayStation Plus. Halo Studios clarifies. So, because originally I think there was a thought that you did need a PlayStation Plus subscription, but it looks like there's been an update on this. So, Halo Studios has clarified that a PlayStation Plus subscription will not be required for Halo Campaign Evolved split screen co-op on PS5. The developer revealed in an X-Twitter post that its previous explanation, which said both users will need a PlayStation Plus account to play local co-op, was incorrect. Although split-screen players will need to have standard PlayStation accounts, they will not be required to have an active PlayStation Plus subscription. The original Halo Waypoint post has also been updated with the clarification. A PlayStation Plus subscription will not still be required for online network co-op play. You can read Halo Studios' full clarification below. We incorrectly stated that PlayStation Plus is required for local co-op split-screen play. The official Halo X account said. Local split-screen co-op requires a PlayStation account for each player, but does not require a PlayStation Plus account. So, there you go. because I was getting a lot of backlash for that, right? That both, anybody wanting to play local co-op, right, needed to have a PlayStation Plus. But looks like that's not the case. So, okay. So I guess not completely a disaster, but, because there was a lot of backlash going on that, right? And all, but looks like ultimately, wasn't quite as bad as people were making it out to be. But yeah, well, we'll see what comes of that game there. I have some, I'm definitely curious about it. So hopefully it'll end up being pretty good. But now let's switch gears though and start talking about a classic horror game, which pretty much defined the survival horror genre as we know it now. Resident Evil. This game really made me appreciate horror games. And I think for a lot of people, obviously, right? I mean, this is pretty much the first game that popularized this genre, as there's been some attempts, right, to make some kind of like scary games before, but due to the combination of probably the technology that was available, right, on how you can do video games, and also potentially just the direction, right, that people were wanting to take with it. It really, I think things just kind of came together for Resident Evil, right, to make its mark. And I mean, I remember when I first played this game, I mean, I really immediately was hooked on it. And growing up, I was always into like horror films, everything from, 80s kid and all that. I probably shouldn't have been watching these movies at the time, but I mean, I was into like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Pumpkinhead, a lot of other obscure horror movies from back in the 80s, and then as we got into the 90s. And so I had a lot of love for that kind of stuff. And so when this game came out, I just immediately fell in love with it because of just the overall horror element to it. And then that it was a really engrossing game, right? Once you actually started playing it, because really when it comes down to it, it's kind of like it's basically like a Metroidvania in a lot of sense, right? Where you have like a big map to explore, and you're finding items, and then eventually these items unlock a certain area, and so forth, right? So I don't really like that kind of gameplay style, and so now that it was set in this kind of in a kind of a creepy environment, just really made this game. It just gave a really good first impression for me. And at the time, I thought the graphics were really impressive as well, too. This is the first game that I played, and one of the first games really of all time where it used this graphical style where it was pre-rendered backdrops with polygonal characters. And so for what that allowed is that it made the environments, again, what was able to be done at the time, seem kind of realistic. And then with the character models, because you can fit more polygons on the models themselves, right, as you don't have to worry about the backgrounds, it made them animate, and again, what was available at the time, right, made them feel lifelike. So it gave it a certain sense of like realism to the overall game. Of course, that was kind of, you were kind of deterred from that from once you actually started hearing like the voice acting and all, which we're going to get into later on this game because it's part of the game's actual charm now. But at the time, though, right, and all, it definitely gave an impression, right, that they were going for a very cinematic horror experience. And truly, this is the main game that popularized this. As eventually, after this game, not only did this series get just a ton of sequels afterwards, right? I mean, the series is still going strong to this day with the recent release of Resident Evil Requiem, but also a lot of other games, right, that were trying to capitalize on this game's success, whether if they were trying to clone the game, right, to an extent, right, or also be a competitor towards it, like for example the Silent Hill series. And so it's definitely now become a very popular genre, right, with just survival horror games now. And so there's but I guess I should kind of sort of preface so that there's games that have had like a horror theme to it, right? But then survival horror. And basically survival horror is where you're in some kind of an environment, right? And your resources are limited. Or you're not like just like like a tank character of some sort, right? Where you could just mow down the enemies. I mean, to an extent you can in some Resident Evil games, but at least early on, right? The emphasis was that you're trying to survive in this area that is very haunting in a way, and your resources are limited. So part of the tension of the game is that you're really trying to scrape by to survive, right? Like, you don't want to use all your ammo because you might run out of it later. Then you're going to have a hard time beating a certain area, right? Or can you escape from this area? And so that's sort of the gist of this genre here. But let's get into it now here with the overall information of this game, the development, my first personal playthrough of this game and all, as this is definitely a classic one. Resident Evil is a 1996 survival horror game developed and published by Capcom for the original PlayStation. It is the first main installment in Capcom's Resident Evil series. So it's set in the fictional Arklay Mountain region in the Midwest, and players control Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, members of the elite task force STARS, who must escape a mansion infested with zombies and other monsters. So just to clarify, so STARS is the name of the police force, right, that they're from. And let's see, I think it stands for, I'm trying to look up like the definition of what STARS stands for. Okay, so it stands for Special Tactics and Rescue Service. And so Resident Evil was conceived by the producer Takuro Fujiwara, inspired by the limitations on his 1989 horror game Sweet Home. So to read a little bit about Sweet Home here. And so Sweet Home was a role-playing game developed by and published by Capcom for the family computer. It was developed alongside the horror film Sweet Home and tells the story of a team of five filmmakers exploring an old mansion in search of precious frescoes hidden there. As they explore the mysterious mansion and encounter hostile ghosts and other supernatural enemies. The player must navigate through the intricately laid out mansion, battling with the enemies and the five main characters with the limited weapons and health restorative items available. The narrative moves forward regardless of whether characters stay alive, and it leads to 5 different endings. Oh, so that's interesting. So he had also previously worked on arcade games such as like Ghosts and Goblins. So it seems like he had a bit of a love for like that kind of stuff, right? But a little bit of the survival or the Sweet Home game. Yeah, it's kind of like an RPG, and and actually as you're playing the game, as you're going through like one room into the other, it has the now iconic like loading screen, right, where it has like a door slowly opening and all. Only back then with 8-bit graphics. So that's it was a big inspiration, right, for this game, as I said there. But this game, Resident Evil, was directed by Shinji Mikami, who he's gone on to done a lot of incredible games. But it went through several redesigns. It was first as a Super Nintendo game, I didn't know this, in 1993, and then a fully 3D first-person PlayStation game in 1994, and finally a third-person game. Gameplay consists of action, exploration, puzzle solving, and inventory management. Resident Evil established many conventions seen later in the series and in other survival horror games, including the inventory system, save system, and use of vital monitoring system instead of a health counter. Resident Evil was praised for its graphics, gameplay, sound, and atmosphere, although it received some criticism for its dialogue and voice acting. But it was an international bestseller and became the highest selling PlayStation game at that time. By December of 1997, it had sold about 4 million copies worldwide and had grossed over more than US $200 million. Resident Evil is often cited as one of the greatest and most influential video games ever made. It is credited with defining the survival horror genre and with returning the zombies to popular culture, leading to a renewed interest in zombie films by the 2000s. Yeah, because it was like a stretch after Resident Evil, right? So Resident Evil came out in 1996, and up until like The Walking Dead, I would say, is where there was just a lot of zombie movies, films, and whatnot, right, that came out. We still get some to this day, but there was like a long stretch there, right, where there was just zombies were just really popular in pop culture. But let's see. It created a franchise including video games, films, comics, novels, and other merchandise. The original Resident Evil has been ported to the Sega Saturn, Windows, and Nintendo DS. Its sequel, Resident Evil 2, was released in 1998, and both the game's remakes and prequel were released on the GameCube in 2002. So going with the gameplay here. So Resident Evil, so again, you choose between either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine as they explore the Spencer mansion to find the their missing compatriots and secure an escape route. The environment is presented in a third-person perspective using fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds, while the character uses tank controls to move here. So what that means, if you've never played a Resident Evil game, it can be very clunky. If you've never gone back to these old ones, you're going to be, if you're more used to modern games. The controls back then, so they're called tank controls because you're moving in this fixed camera angle, right? So meaning that the way they controlled it is that regardless of what direction you're facing, if you move up, it's what's always going to move you forward, right? And then if you go back, you're going to kind of like back up a little bit, right? As opposed to like, where you move the controller and it's going to move you in that direction, if that makes any sense. But very difficult to kind of wrap your mind around when we first played this game. And like I said, if you're going back to this game now, not having played these older kind of 3D games before, but it was part of the and they might get into it here in a bit, but it definitely kind of amped up the tension though, right? Because the controls, you almost had to think a little bit about how to maneuver around, and so then when you had a screen filled with zombies, it definitely made it very tense, right? Where you're trying to like, oh crap, how can I get out of this situation, right, without trying to be bitten and all. And so whether if it was intentional or not, it definitely amped up the tension, right, because of that, because it always felt like you weren't always in complete control of your character. And so it kind of made it feel like in real life, right? Like, I mean, if you were surrounded by zombies, right, you feel like you'd be able to know what to do, but would you really, and so it might seem a bit awkward, right, and all, as you're trying to escape, right? And so that's the controls kind of gave it that feeling. And again, it probably was just a limitation of the hardware and all, or just a way, again, this is very early 5th generation, and so developers were still trying to figure out how to control a character in a 3D space, but it had that added effect though, right, whether for better or worse, which I personally kind of appreciated about these games back then. But just FYI, if you're going back to this game and you've never had a game with tank controls, it could definitely be a bit awkward at first. But certain parts of the environment can be examined, items can be collected, heavy objects can be pushed around, and the players can navigate through from room to room using doors, stairs, or elevators. Both characters have different perks. Chris has more health and handles heavy weapons more effectively, while Jill has an increased inventory capacity and starts with a lockpick that opens several locked doors, which Chris must find keys for. Let's see. Then I don't know if I mentioned it later, but Chris does start though with a lighter, which where otherwise Jill would have to go find the lighter, right? And that helps with like certain puzzles. But basically, in what I feel, I could be wrong on this, but I feel like Jill is kind of more the easy mode, and even though she has less health, but I feel like just getting around the mansion initially, it's a bit easier with her. But Chris and Jill begin only with a survival knife and a Beretta M92FS. Now, to back up on that, so Jill actually also has the Beretta, where Chris doesn't have it from the immediate start. He gets it pretty quickly as the game goes on, but he doesn't have it from the beginning, though. And zombies and various other monsters scattered around the mansion will attack them on sight. Let's see. While the player can procure other firearms to defend themselves, including a Remington Model 870 and a Colt Python, there is limited ammunition throughout the area, preventing the players from killing everything they come across. Taking damage depletes the player's health, shown on an electrocardiogram in the inventory screen. It can be used. It can be restored using herbs and first aid sprays. But if the player takes too much damage, they will die and must restart from their last save. So the player has limited inventory capacity of 6 slots as Chris or 8 as Jill. Spare items can be deposited in item boxes found inside various safe rooms alongside typewriters that let players use ink ribbons to save their progress. In the inventory screen, items can be examined, equipped, discarded or combined with each other to produce various effects, as in combining two herbs to increase their potency or making an item needed to progress. Certain items are needed to solve puzzles and either provided the player with more supplies or open new areas. So each character also has a supporting partner that joins them in the story. So the field medic Rebecca Chambers is in Chris's campaign, where the weapons specialist Barry Burton is in Jill's campaign. Depending on the player's actions, their partners can either die or accompany them throughout the entire game. There's different endings exist depending on whether the player is able to save their partner and or the other playable character and escape with them. So the plot line. On July 24th of 1998, the Bravo team of Raccoon City Special Tactics and Rescue Services, known as STARS, is sent out to the surrounding Arklay forest to investigate a recent string of cannibalistic murders. When contact with them is lost, Alpha Team is sent to investigate, consisting of Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Joseph Frost, Brad Vickers, and Captain Albert Wesker. They discover Bravo Team's helicopter crashed in the forest, with pilot Kevin Dooley dead at the scene. Alpha Team continues to explore the surrounding forest, but are suddenly attacked by a pack of ravenous Dobermans. Joseph is mauled to death, while Brad flees in their helicopter. The survivors flee from their pursuers, eventually taking shelter in the mysterious mansion. One member of Alpha Team, Barry in Chris's story, or Chris and Jill's story, is separated and does not make it inside. The player's character splits off from the others to investigate noises coming from the West Wing, but discover Bravo Team's member Kenneth Sullivan eaten by a zombie. When Wesker mysteriously vanishes alongside Jill in Chris's story, the player is left to explore the mansion alone and attempt to find their allies. As they explore, they find the Bravo Team has been massacred. Forrest Speyer was pecked to death by infected crows, while Richard Akins dies from venomous poisoning. Oh my god, venom poisoning after being bitten by a yawn, a giant mutated snake. And Captain Enrico Marini is shot to death in the torso by an unseen person just revealed after there is a mole in STARS. The only Bravo Team survivor, field medic Rebecca Chambers, is rescued by Chris. The player eventually comes to discover that the mansion is a research facility of Umbrella, a pharmaceutical corporation that was secretly producing organic weapons. All right, so we're going to stop there because this is getting more into like spoiler areas there. But yeah, so basically there's an evil corporation that's behind things, and which is why this mansion is filled with some zombies. Ultimately, the story, it's pretty campy, right? Nothing too crazy and all, but at the time it was pretty revolutionary though. Again, right, you have to kind of think back that this was in 1996 where these kind of things just were unheard of in video games, right? Where it has like maybe a bit cheesy and all, a bit campy, but it has a very cinematic feel about it. We still hadn't had Metal Gear, right? We still hadn't had Final Fantasy VII, some games that really elevated that even further. And so this was a step right in that direction there where games were just starting to become more cinematic overall. But development though. So Resident Evil was created by a team of staff members who would later become part of Capcom Production Studio 4. The inspiration for Resident Evil was the earlier Capcom horror game Sweet Home, itself a video game adaptation of the Japanese horror film of the same name. Excuse me. Shinji Mikami was commissioned to make a game set in a mansion like Sweet Home. The project was proposed by Sweet Home creator Takuro Fujiwara, who was Mikami's mentor and served as the game's producer. Fujiwara said the basic premise was that I'd be able to do things that I wasn't able to include in Sweet Home, mainly on the graphics front, and he was confident that horror games could become a genre in themselves. He entrusted Mikami, who was initially reluctant because he hated being scared with the project because he understood what's frightening. Resident Evil adopted many gameplay systems from Sweet Home, including the limited item inventory management, the mansion setting, the puzzles, the emphasis on survival horror, the door loading screen, and the use of scattered notes and diary entries as basic storytelling mechanics. multiple endings depending on how many characters survive, backtracking to previous locations in order to solve puzzles later on, the use of death animation, individual character items such as lockpick or a lighter, restoring health throughout items through items scattered across the mansion, the intricate layout of the mansion, and the brutally horrific imagery. Part of the inspiration for limited ammunition came from the MSX port of the game Alcazar: The Forgotten Fortress. According to scenario writer Kenichi Iwao, the idea of having limited ammunition was inspired by the limited amount of supplies in the game's randomized dungeons. Iwao wanted to take more elements from the game, such as adding more ways to attack zombies and items such as mines and traps, but was unable due to schedule constraints. So the production of this game started back in 1993, and the game took 2 or 3 years to develop. During the first 6 months of development, Mikami worked on the game alone, creating concept sketches, designing characters, and writing over 40-page script. The project was originally planned for the Super Nintendo before moving to development on the PlayStation in 1994. Koji Oda was working on the Super Nintendo version after having worked on Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Oda revealed that the setting was originally more of a hellish place before being changed to a more realistic setting. So, several of the Resident Evil Mansion pre-rendered backdrops were inspired by the Overlook Hotel, the setting for the 1980 horror film The Shining. Oh, interesting. The Shining, that's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, even though I'm kind of still traumatized by that damn movie. But Mikami also cited that the 1978 film Dawn of the Dead as a negative inspiration for the game. The game was initially conceived as a fully 3D and first-person with action and shooting mechanics. A first-person prototype was produced and initially featured a supernatural, psychological, Japanese horror style similar to Sweet Home before opting for an American zombie horror style influenced by George A. Romero films. During production, Mikami discovered Alone in the Dark, which was released in 1992. So Alone in the Dark, I guess you can say, was kind of more the Godfather, I guess, of these kind of games, right? But I've played that game a little bit, and it's really clunky. I can imagine at the time I probably would have gotten into it had I had the means to play it back then. But the colors are, like the color usage on the game is kind of colorful, and you wouldn't think that it's like a horror game when you first look at it, because it just seems maybe more like a puzzle game. But I guess you can say it was kind of like the main game of this style first, right? Because in reality, Resident Evil takes a lot of influence from that game there. But the game was fairly popular, I guess, right? But Resident Evil is the one that really took off, right? So, but it influenced him to adopt a cinematic fixed camera system. Mikami said that if it wasn't for Alone in the Dark, Resident Evil would have had a first-person view instead. So again, right? Yeah, it was pretty heavily influenced, right? But Mikami was initially reluctant to adopt Alone in the Dark's fixed camera system, saying it had an effect on immersion, making the player feel a bit more detached, but eventually adopted it because the use of pre-rendered backdrops allowed a higher level of detail than his fully 3D first-person view prototype, which didn't get along so well with the original PlayStation specs. So concept art claimed to be the original... A concept art claimed to be of the original first-person prototype has been available since the 1990s, showing more similarity to Doom rather than Alone in the Dark. A first-person perspective was not used again for the mainline Resident Evil series until Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So I am kind of curious now. I wonder if there's a picture, I guess, of this that exists out there. Seems like it is. Okay, so I just did a little bit of Googling on the side here, and I think I found it. So interesting. I will see if I can post up a picture of it up here on the screen there. And it's a bit blurry, but it's the only thing I could find, just doing a quick search. And a quick Reddit post mentioned that it's, as far as people know, it seems to be the only concept art that's available out there. So interesting. I didn't know that. But a later prototype featured cooperative gameplay But this feature was eventually removed as Mikami said it technically wasn't good enough. Early footage of this co-op prototype was revealed in 1995. At this stage of development, a local co-op mode was present along with different outfits. A later demo made for the 1995 V-Jump Festival presentation in Japan featured real-time weapon changes, and the co-op mode removed the rudimentary character models and textures. An early 1996 preview in Maximum Console magazine featured a graveyard and a slightly different version of the final boss. The graveyard, which was removed from the final game, eventually made it into the 2002 remake. Also featured in the game until late in development were guest houses and a tower, which were replaced by the guardhouse and a lab, respectively. Another feature that was removed from the final game was a real-time weapon changing from the earlier 1995 V-Jump demo. The co-op mode and the real-time weapon changing were not used again for the mainline series until Resident Evil 5. Oh, wow. So I'm wondering if, it almost makes it sound like that's like something that they went back to, right? Like an idea that they had way back then and didn't get used until 2009 when Resident Evil 5 came out. Interesting. So Capcom did not use any motion capture in the game despite having their own motion capture studio. Instead, the animators referred to books and videos to study how people, spiders, and other animals encountered in the game move. Excuse me. In pre-production, other characters were conceived. Dewey, an African-American man, was intended to perform a comic relief role, while Gelzer, a big cyborg, was a typical strongman character. Both were later replaced by Rebecca and Barry, respectively. A cyborg character? Huh, that's interesting. Almost all development was done by Silicon Graphics hardware using the software program Softimage. The PlayStation was chosen as a lead platform because of the development team felt it was the most appropriate for the game in terms of things such as the amount of polygons. The development team had upwards of 80 people towards the end of the game's development. According to Aki Sakai, head of Capcom's consumer software division, Capcom was hesitant to port Resident Evil to the Saturn because of the hardware was not as ideally suited to the game as the PlayStation, ensuring the port would take a long time. A Saturn version was finally unveiled at the April 1997 Tokyo Game Show, at which Capcom also showed a demo for the sequel for the PlayStation. Oh, my poor Saturn. Here's to you, Saturn. I'm going to crack open a beer for you. Nah, I'm joking. This is just a soda. But yeah, the Sega Saturn, man. It's kind of unfortunate with that system there, but it did get a port though, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later here. The port wasn't half bad though. I mean, it's I did play that port back in the day, and it's not a bad way to experience the game. You know, the PlayStation version, yes, it's better. The Saturn version has a few extra things, nothing too crazy, but it did make it on there though. So for what it's worth. But let's see, oh my god. The live action full motion video sequences were filmed in Japan with a cast of American actors. So Charlie Kraslavetsky, if I'm pronouncing that right, played as Chris. Inez Jesenwaski, oh my god, Inez Jesenwaski as Jill. Sorry if I'm butchering these names. But Greg Smith as Barry, Linda as Rebecca, Eric Prius as Albert, and Jason Durkee as Joseph. All Japanese release contain English voice acting with Japanese caption and text, recorded at a recording studio in Tokyo and provided by Scott McCulloch. So Chris as the narrator, Lisa Faye as Jill, Barry Gurgi as Barry, Lynn Harris as Rebecca and the triggering system, Sergio Alcaron as Brad and Joseph, Clay Alicorn as Richard or Zombie in the Forest Spire, and he plays zombies also apparently, and then Dean Harrington, who voices Enrico and additional voices. Pablo Kuntz as Albert in the radio transmission, and Ward Sexton as title and character name and announcer. Harris was also the voice director for the game, basing her direction on making it camp loosely on Dawn of the Dead. The Blob, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. However, Japanese voice performances were also recorded but were left unused, as Mikami found the quality of the performances inadequate. However, lead programmer Yasuhiro Anpo later said that due to all the development staff being Japanese, they were unaware of the poor localization that apparently hindered the realism of the immersion of the title for the international release, which was one of the reasons for the redub in the 2002 remake. The original Japanese PlayStation version also features a vocal ending theme, probably going to butcher this, but Yume de Awarensei, or I guess it's translated to "I Won't Let This End as a Dream," performed by Japanese rock artist Fumitaka Fujigami, that is not in any other version of the game. So Fujiwara said that the game was originally targeted towards a core audience, and he only expected it to sell 200,000 copies before the game went on to sell millions. Mikami said that he was a little worried about how well a horror game would really sell, and Poe said that Capcom did not expect the game to be successful. Interesting. And, it ultimately, it might have, American horror and Japanese horror are kind of different things. If you watch, horror movies from either culture, and this definitely leans more towards the American horror side, right? Zombies obviously being the kind of the obvious thing, as again, we had like things like Dawn of the Dead and things like that before in the past. And so, but probably that might have led to the success. So the mainstream success of this game was because they ended up targeting an American audience. They were using English voice actors from the beginning, and just kind of more in that Western horror element of it. And that might have been what ended up blowing up. I love like a lot of like Japanese horror stuff. They have a different take on it, right? Which is very interesting. And later on, there would be a lot of games that were really popular that were based on more Japanese horror style storytelling, like things that come to mind is, for me personally, I feel like Silent Hill 2 kind of leans more into that, and also like the Fatal Frame series as well, and then a bunch of other stuff, right, that has come out since. But at the time, right, again, because it was kind of a new sort of concept, it might have benefited them, right, in that they took the direction that they did because of that. That's just my thought. But it seems like they made the right call. But it's kind of funny though, right? That they originally thought that the Japanese actors were, not that great, when in reality, the American voice acting was just kind of known to be pretty horrific. Having said that, though, right? Like I said, and it's no shame towards the actors or anything like that. There's a few things I'm sure that kind of led to that. Is, first of all, again, this is acting in video games is still fairly new. Like they just mentioned there also, right? This is a Japanese company, writing the script and all, right, but using American voice actors and all, and writing the dialogue, and also might have, so, there's certain like nuances within each culture, right, and all that if you don't understand it, right, it can come across as a bit cheesy, right? Like sometimes that's why sometimes like American audiences, when they're listening to like a dub of anime, it can come across as kind of cringy, right? And now where, in their native language, right, that kind of dialogue and everything is more accepted, I guess, and vice versa, right? So for what it's worth, though, right? I know I feel like it's just kind of a charming part of this game. Yes, it's a bit bad, right? But it's still, I don't know. It's charming in its own way, and I can't. Sometimes I like playing this original version just so I can get a taste of this great voice acting, like you'll hear here.
Oh, Barry! That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich. You're right.
Yeah, it's part of the charm of the game, though, and all, right? But looks like there's a little bit more here regarding the English localization. So Biohazard was named for the North American and European markets after Chris Kramer, the director of communications for Capcom, pointed out that it would be impossible to trademark it in the United States. Excuse me. Among others, the 1992 video game Biohazard Battle and the New York alternative metal band Biohazard were all... Okay, I always wondered if... Because I remember listening to Biohazard back in the day. I was like, I always wondered if that was one of the things that... why Resident Evil couldn't use the name Biohazard here in the States. So, okay, so it looks like that was part of it. Capcom ran an internal company contest to find a new name. Resident Evil was chosen since the game takes place in a mansion. Kramer thought the name was super cheesy, but the rest of the marketing crew loved it and were ultimately able to convince Capcom Japan and Mikami-san that the name fit. The cover artwork for the American and European releases was created by Bill Sienkiewicz. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. But yeah, interesting. And, and I think Biohazard is cool. I think that's a great name, but I kind of like Resident Evil though more. It's maybe just because that's what I'm used to now, but I'm kind of glad that they went with Resident Evil. So the original PlayStation version of Resident Evil went through several changes between its original Japanese release and its international counterparts. The North American and European versions of the intro were heavily cut from the one featured in the Japanese releases. Shots of mangled corpses, a Cerberus zombie being shot, Joseph's death, and Kenneth's severed head were edited out, as well as scenes featuring the characters Chris Redfield smoking a cigarette. Despite those tweaks, the game was ultimately released on the PlayStation as one of the first games to receive a mature rating from the Entertainment Software Ratings Board. So in the game itself, the auto-aiming function was disabled, and the number of ink ribbons found by the player were reduced. Capcom also planned to eliminate the interconnected nature of item boxes, meaning that items could only be retrieved from the location where they were originally stored. This change made it to preview copies of the US version, but was removed from retail release. The particular game mechanic would resurface in the GameCube remake as part of the unlockable difficulty setting. Mikami noted that they made the American version harder at the request of the American staff so that the game could be rented and not completed in a few days. Mikami said that this version proved fairly difficult for Capcom staff, who had to play very carefully to complete it. All right, so releases of the game. So the game was released on the PlayStation in Japan of March 22nd of 1996 and in North America on April 1st. And in Europe on August 16th. So not too much of a wait time, right, between regions, which back then, right, and all, there was a bit of a wait time sometimes, but it looks like this game came out fairly close together. It was then reissued and ported to other systems, with many gaining new features in the process. So there was a Windows version that was released in December of 1996, and it featured the uncensored footage from the Japanese version, and the opening intro is in full color rather than black and white. It is the only version of Resident Evil that has all the uncensored full motion video FMV sequences, which includes the uncensored introduction of uncensored introduction, Kenneth's death scene, and its entirety and ending. Support for 3D accelerator cards were added, allowing for much sharper graphics. The two new unlockable weapons were added: an MAC-10 for Jill and an FN Mini-Me for Chris. New unlockable outfits for Chris and Jill were added as well. It also skips the door animations and allows saves without ink ribbons, only in Jill's game. The original Windows version was re-released on June 26th of 2024 by GOG.com to include quality of life improvements and enhanced compatibility. Following the release of the first title, GOG.com released Resident Evil 2 on August 27th and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis on September 25th, both individually and as a $24.99 bundle. On April 1st of 2026, this version was released on Steam along with the rest of the trilogy. I might just get it on Steam then. I knew it came out, GOG had released it, but I guess I wasn't aware it was available on Steam. Because these re-releases, these original games are still, I feel like they definitely have their place for sure. They're excellent games still. And again, because of the tank controls, it gives the games a bit of a different feel than the remakes. Now, the remakes are incredible, right? But they shouldn't replace the original one. So I definitely don't think that they should. And so I'm glad that GOG brought them back. And then I guess now apparently on Steam. And I wish that they would come out like on modern consoles. I would love to have the original trilogy on the Switch. PlayStation has the Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, which is cool. But it always kind of boggled me why these games wouldn't get re-released again, right? Because they were pretty popular back then. But there was I talked about it some months back where there was a comment, I think it was from someone from Capcom, where they said basically like that, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the lines that that the remakes are better, right? Like it's like, don't play the old version, right? Just play the remakes. And it's like, why would you do that? You know, this is history. This is part of your legacy here, right? And then, yes, granted, I'm sure the remakes sell a lot more, and they're going to be more easy for modern game players, right, to get into. But these originals still have their place, and if anything, for video game preservation. So that was a bit upsetting, right, when they said that. But at the least, it sounds like they're on Steam now. And also, actually, I didn't know they were on Steam, so I might check that out and might try to get it there just so I can have them. You know, I mean, I can emulate the games just easily as well too. But I'm definitely all for trying to get an official release as well too, if it's available. But the Sega Saturn version. Oh, my Sega Saturn. You know, I'm kind of itching to do like some bit of a Sega Saturn retrospective of some sort. I've loved that system so much, and I feel like it's just so underrated. But anyways, so the Sega Saturn version, released in July of 1997, added an unlockable battle mode in which the players must traverse through a series of rooms from the main game and eliminate all enemies within them with the weapon selected by the player. It features 2 exclusive enemies not in the main game, a zombie version of Wesker and a gold-colored tyrant. The player's performance in the battle mode is graded at the end. The game's backgrounds were touched up to include more detail in this version. The Japanese version is the more gore-laden of the platforms. After decapitating a crawling zombie with a kick, the head remains on the floor. Interesting. The Plant 42 can cut the character in half before the game over screen, though the live action footage is censored in the US version. The Saturn version also includes enemy monsters such as a reskinned breed of hunters known as Ticks and a second tyrant prior to the game's final battle in Chris's game. Exclusive outfits for Jill and Chris were added as well. The versions were published in Europe by Sega instead of Capcom, Capcom's usual European publisher, Virgin Interactive Entertainment. But then there was a director's cut for the PlayStation. So this second version, Resident Evil Director's Cut, was released in September of 1997. Director's Cut was produced to compensate for the highly publicized delay of the sequel, Resident Evil 2. Excuse me, which that's kind of its own story there, but and was originally bundled with a playable pre-release demo of that game. The Japanese version of the demo disc also included a pre-release demo of Rockman Neo, later retitled Rockman Dash, or Rockman Legends outside of Japan, and a trailer for the newly released Breath of Fire 3. The main addition to Director's Cut is an arranged version of the game that changes the location of nearly every vital item in the mansion, as well as the enemy placement and camera angles. In addition to adding faster-paced zombies and a reanimated forest spire. The main characters, as well as Rebecca, are given a new wardrobe in the game, and the player's handgun is replaced by an improved model where any shot fired has a random chance of decapitating a zombie, killing it instantly. The original version of the game is included as well, along with the new beginner mode where the enemies are easier to kill and the amount of ammunition can be found by the player is doubled. Additionally, the auto-aim function was restored in all modes, though it is not noted in the game controls. The North American and European versions of Director's Cut were marketed as featuring the original uncensored footage from the Japanese release. However, the full motion video sequences were still censored, and Capcom claimed the omission was the result of localization mistake made by the developers. Oh, jeez. The game's localization was handled by Capcom Japan instead of Capcom USA, and when submitted to Sony Computer Entertainment of America, it was rejected because of one line of copyright text. Rather than remove the individual line, Capcom Japan decided to save time and simply swap in the cinematics from the US release of the original Resident Evil. Interesting. So Sony Computer Entertainment of America then approved the game and manufactured a full production run without Capcom USA having any idea that the uncensored scenes had been cut. Cool. So 3 days after the game's release, the uncensored intro was offered as a free download via their website. Oh, interesting. The French and German PAL versions of Director's Cut do feature the uncensored intro full motion video in color, though they lack the uncensored Kenneth's death scene. The Director's Cut was included in the lineup for the PlayStation Classic, which was released on December 3rd of 2018. It also was made available for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on June 13th of 2022. So but there was another version still, the Director's Cut DualShock version. So the DualShock controller came out. When did it come out? It came out, well, yeah, like around 1997, right? Something like that. Anyways, from my understanding, they're probably going to get into it here. This is kind of actually an inferior version, but let's read here. So, third version of the PlayStation game. So, Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock version, co-produced by Keiji Inafune, was released in August of 1998. It includes all the features from the Director's Cut with support for the DualShock controllers, analog controls, and vibration functions, as well as a new symphonic soundtrack replacing the original soundtrack by Makoto Tomozawa, Koichi Hirooki, and Masami Ueda. The symphonic music was credited to composer Mamoru Samuragachi, although he admitted in 2014 that he directed his orchestrator Takashi Nagaki to ghostwrite the new soundtrack. Interesting. The Japanese DualShock version came packaged with a bonus disc that contained downloadable save data, footage of the unused Japanese dub versions of the live-action cutscenes, along with the brief gameplay footage of the canceled original version of Resident Evil 2. The soundtrack was generally deemed inferior to the original, with ambient theme for the mansion's basement considered to be one of the worst video game compositions of all time. I'll see if I can find a quick little snippet here of that version. Ugh, pretty horrific. But let's see. So in 1998, Capcom USA released the game under PlayStation's Greatest Hits label. In North America, Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock was released as a downloadable game for the PlayStation Network soon after it launched in November 2006, although the game was advertised as the original Director's Cut box art. In Japan and Europe, the original Director's Cut was instead made available for the PlayStation Network. So there was a Game Boy Color version of this game too also, and it was developed by the software house HotGen. Was supposed to be released in late 1999 or early 2000 until Capcom decided to cancel this project, citing that the port was of poor quality due to the Game Boy's limited hardware. So this version contains every room, cutscene, and almost all the items were present in the original PlayStation version. In January of 2012, an anonymous individual claimed to have an EEPROM cartridge of the Game Boy Color version and requested $2,000 before he was willing to leak the playable ROM. The goal was met in February, and the ROM files containing an unfinished build of the game were subsequently leaked. In 2025, a near-complete build of the Game Boy Color version was leaked online. Okay, so it did it. Okay, because I remember seeing screenshots of it, so I almost thought it was an official release, but looks like it didn't actually get an official release, but it was released to an extent. But then there's actually a port here though that I'm actually kind of, I think if I replay this game, this is the version I'm going to try, but it was a port for the Nintendo DS. So it's called Resident Evil Deadly Silence, or known in Japan as Biohazard Deadly Silence. And it was released in January of 2006. So it was made to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the series. Deadly Silence includes a classic mode, the original game with minimal enhancements and touchscreen support, and a rebirth mode containing greater number of enemies and a series of new puzzles that make use of the platform's capabilities. The character models are remade with better textures and different clothing, and the enemies have higher quality of detail. Although the graphic changes are difficult to notice on the DS dual screen, they are easier to notice on a HD emulator. Exclusive new outfits for Jill, Chris, and Rebecca were added as well. The player's handgun and Magnum were replaced with the models from the 2002 remake. The soundtrack prior to Director's Cut DualShock version was restored with a remix track from the game's original soundtrack remix album released in 1996. The game makes use of the dual screen display, with the top screen used to display the map along with the player's remaining ammunition. Oh my god, I can't say that word for some reason today. And health, determined by the color of the background. While the bottom screen displays the main action and can be switched to show the player's inventory, the DS version also includes updated play mechanics. The 180-degree turn introduced in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, along with the knife button and tactical reload from Resident Evil 4. The updated controls are applicable to both classic and rebirth modes. Just like the PC version, the door animations can be skipped as well as the cutscenes. The live action footage was still censored even in the game's Japanese release. However, the cutscene or showing Kenneth's severed head was still kept. Gameplay and combat are otherwise uncensored, thus making it the first of 11 DS games to ever be rated mature by the ESRB. In Rebirth, new puzzles are added that use the system's touchscreen. Knife battle sequence include a first-person perspective are also added, in which the player must fend off incoming enemies by swinging a knife via the stylus. One particular puzzle requires the player to resuscitate an injured comrade by blowing into the built-in microphone. The player can also shake off enemies by using the touchscreen, performing a melee attack. The game also includes wireless LAN support for up to 4 players with two different multiplayer game modes. The game is a cooperative mode. The first style is a cooperative mode in which each player must help the other solve puzzles and escape the mansion together. The other is a competitive mode in which objectives is to get the highest score out of all the players by destroying the most monsters, with the tougher monsters being worth more points. There are 3 playable multiplayer stages and 9 playable characters. And so yet other versions. So in 2007, Capcom Japan released Biohazard: The Operations, based on the original game for mobile phones. The player controlling Chris or Joe can select scenario or challenge mode, the latter featuring around 100 missions. Objectives vary from killing enemies with limited arsenal to getting to a location within the given time, similar to the previous mobile title, Resident Evil Missions. In 2008, Capcom Interactive Canada released Resident Evil Genesis based on the original game. It includes only Jill's game. Genesis was developed from the ground up as a mobile phone title and designed to work more effectively with the limited control scheme and screen size. It uses turn-based movement and grid systems combat borrowed from previous mobile games, Resident Evil Confidential Report. The result is a game that is more of a puzzle adventure game than the survival horror titles found in console versions. The game scored 7.8 out of 10 on IGN and an A on OneUp.com. A sequel to Genesis, Resident Evil Uprising, based on Resident Evil 2, was released in 2009. And in July of 2008, Capcom Japan and Yamahasa released Pocky Slot Biohazard based on the original game. So the character's fate in battle is decided according to the result obtained in the relay. It also features a bonus mode where players must defend themselves from enemies sent by Wesker. This version has Jill in her outfit from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis instead of her STARS uniform. And at the end of the 2008 financial year, Capcom reported a healthy growth in income from the slot machines, including which were released during the downturn in the Pocky Slot business. Okay, so reviews on this game and just overall reception. I mean, it was pretty well reviewed all the way across the board. So the original version of the Resident Evil was critically acclaimed, receiving an aggregated rating of 91 out of 100 at Metacritic based on 8 reviews. Among those who praised the game was GameSpot, describing it as one of the rare games that's almost as entertaining to watch as it is to play. Famitsu gave it rating of 9 out of 10, or there was 9, 10, 10, and 9 out of 10, adding up to 38 out of 40. This made it one of their 3 highest rated games of 1996, along with Super Mario 64, which scored 39 out of 40, and Tekken 2, which scored 38 out of 40. Resident Evil was also one of the only 10 games to have received the Famitsu score of 38 out of 40 or above up until 1996. GamePro described the storyline and cinematics as mostly laughable, but felt the gameplay's gripping pace and the heavy challenge of both the combat and the puzzles make the game effectively terrifying. They reassured readers that the unusual control system becomes intuitive with practice and applauded the realism instilled by the graphics and sound effects. The 4 reviewers of Electronic Gaming Monthly also commented on the game, on the realistic graphics and sounds, and additionally praised the selection of 2 playable characters. Sushi X remarked that at a first glance, may appear to be a clone of Alone in the Dark, but in reality, it is a totally new experience. Mark Lefebvre Revere, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but he remarked, the elements that really grabs a player here is fear. After trading blows with the first zombie, you'll quickly become hesitant to turn down any uncharted corridors in the mansion. And a part of that was because of the scare factor, right? That they just might come out. And also because of the controls, as you're going through this hallway, and, you know, the tank controls, again, aren't immediately the most responsive as far as, like, you know, the direction you want to go. But that amplified the tension, at least for me, I felt. But reviewer for Next Generation said it manages to be as genuinely scary as a good horror film. No small achievement. There is a lot of things that work around the game being this frightening. In this case, however, the fine character work, creepy and well executed sound effects, and just the right music in just the right places all have a subtle cumulative effect. While criticizing the laughable dialogue and voice acting, he felt they were overridden by the game's positive aspects. He pointed out that the lack of genuinely confounding puzzles allow the game to move at a good pace. And the use of pre-rendered backgrounds allowed the PlayStation to handle much more detailed characters. Yasuhiro Hunter of Maximum stated that the game has the greatest atmosphere of any game in existence. And yeah, and that was a big thing, right? At the time, right? As far as like atmosphere, you know, and all, this was new, you know, and again, they could do this because of, you know, now in a 3D environment, even though they were using pre-rendered backgrounds, but it's like, oh, there's like atmosphere, there's like a tone to the game. 2D games could have done that before also, for sure, but that's one of the benefits of like moving to 3D, right? Is that it was just more effective at creating atmosphere, in my opinion, right? Well, at least at the time, anyways. But naming a game okay, so continuing from his quote. So naming a game that makes you jump as much as when encountering your first pair of Cerebros in this title would be very difficult. So he also praised the heavy difficulty of the puzzles, the great care required in combat, the 3D graphics, and the exceptionally high replayability value. And so, yeah, so some of the ports overall, right? So the Saturn 1 and the DS and they all got pretty decent scores all across the board, right? Because the main, you know, some of them have some issues, right? And whatnot, like we already talked about. But the base game of Resident Evil, right, is still pretty good. The overall, that I still feel like they still make for, you know, a decent game overall, right? You know, with the ports. So for sales, Resident Evil was the best seller in Japan, North America, and Europe, including the United Kingdom. Shortly after release, it became the best-selling PlayStation game ever at that time. In Japan, the game sold 1.016 million units in 1996, which made it the fourth best-selling game of the year, only trailing Pocket Monsters, Tekken 2, and Super Mario RPG. Overseas, it topped the US charts and entered at number 2 on the UK charts. In the United States, the game sold over 1 million copies by early September of 1996, becoming a system seller for the PlayStation and increasing its install base at that time. In Europe, the game shipped 230,000 units on its first day of release, and 21,500 sold on its first weekend in the United Kingdom, where it was one of the fastest selling CD releases up until then. The game went on to sell at least more than 300,000 units in Europe by December 1996. By December 1997, the game had sold about 4 million units worldwide and grossed more than 200 million, equivalent to 411 million in 2025. According to Capcom's investor relations website, the original version of Resident Evil has sold over 2.75 million copies, while the Director's Cut version, including the DualShock edition, sold an additional 2.33 million copies. All PlayStation versions of the game has sold a combined 5.08 million units worldwide. And so just overall, Resident Evil was the first game to be dubbed a survival horror, a term that coined the genre. It was ranked as the 91st top game of all time by Next Generation in 1996, stating that it successfully redefined the genre, which started with info games Alone in the Dark. So again, Alone in the Dark kind of started it. Resident Evil really popularized it. In 1996, Games Masters rated the game 14th on their top 100 games of all time. Game Informer referred to the original Resident Evil as one of the most important games of all time in 2007. In 2012, Time named it one of the 100 greatest video games of all time. That same year, the game ranked as G4 TV's top video games of all time for how it has launched one of the most successful series in gaming history and provided one of its most memorable scares. Resident Evil was inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame in 2024. In 2004, readers of Retro Gamer voted Resident Evil as their 37th top retro game, with the staff calling it one of the finest horror-themed games ever, and adding the full shocks, surprises, and perfectly poor B-movie dialogue. Resident Evil is the gaming equivalent of Night of the Living Dead. It entered the Guinness World Record Gamers Edition 2008 for the worst dialogue ever. And Stuff ranked it as... So Stuff Magazine, I think, ranked it as the third best PlayStation game of all time. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, and this is the first game, right? Resident Evil, we're up to mainline games. Okay, so not including spin-offs or anything, just the mainline games. We just got Resident Evil Requiem this year, which is like Resident Evil 9, basically. So just mainline games alone, there's 9 of them. But there's tons of spin-offs and everything, right? Movies that were made. There's an upcoming movie coming out later this year as well, too. And so, yeah, obviously this game had a big influence. But Resident Evil's success resulted in a media franchise that has since branched out into comic books, novels, novelizations, sound dramas, a non-canonical series of live-action films and animated sequels to the games, and a variety of associated merchandise such as action figures. The series has become Capcom's biggest franchise. The events of the games were retold in Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles, originally released for the Wii in 2007. Well, that's a pretty cool Lycan game. If you want to play something like, you know, like basically the events of Resident Evil, it's kind of cool to play through that, if you have access to that, because it came out on the Wii and then it also got ported over to the PlayStation 3 as well. But yeah, just cultural impact, right? So GameSpot listed Resident Evil as one of the 15 most influential video games of all time. It is credited with defining and popularizing the survival horror genre of games. It is also credited with taking video games in a cinematic direction with its B-movie style cutscenes. Its live-action opening, however, was controversial. It became one of the first action games to receive a mature rating from the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, despite the opening cutscene being censored in North America. Chicago Tribune said it revolutionized gaming in 1997. Resident Evil is credited with sparking a revival of the zombie genre in popular culture since the late 1990s, leading to a renewed interest in zombie films during the 2000s. Resident Evil also played an important role in the zombie genre's shift from supernatural themes to scientific themes, using science to explain the origins of zombies. In 2013, George A. Romero said that it was the video games Resident Evil and The House of the Dead more than anything else that popularized zombies in the early 21st century popular culture. A documentary based on his adaptation was released on digital on January 7th of 2025. And in a 2015 interview with Huffington Post, screenwriter-director Alex Garland credited the original Resident Evil video game as a primary influence on his script for this horror film 28 Days Later, which that's actually a great film, and credited the first Resident Evil game for revitalizing the zombie genre. Shaun of the Dead star and co-writer Simon Pegg also credits the original Resident Evil game with starting the zombie revival in popular culture. The Walking Dead comic book creator Robert Kirkman cited Resident Evil as his favorite zombie game, while the Walking Dead television series director Greg Nicotero cited Resident Evil and The House of the Dead with introducing the zombie genre to a whole generation of younger people who didn't grow up watching Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. After the original Resident Evil video game sparked a renewed interest in the zombie genre, it was followed by zombie films such as 28 Days Later, Dawn of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead, 28 Weeks Later, Zombieland, Crockneys vs. Zombies, and World War Z, as well as zombie-influenced graphic novels and television shows such as The Walking Dead, The Return, and books such as World War Z, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and Warm Bodies. The Resident Evil film adaptations also went on to become the highest-grossing film series based on video games after they grossed more than $1 billion worldwide. So, like I was saying earlier, right? There was just like this whole stretch. It was just zombie stuff after zombie stuff. Some stuff cooler, more than others. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff though, right? That came out. But a remake though. So in 2002, Resident Evil was remade for the GameCube as part of an exclusivity agreement between Capcom and Nintendo that spawned 3 new games. The remake includes a variety of new gameplay elements, environments, and story details, as well as improved visuals and sound. The game was later ported for the Wii in 2008. The remastered version of the remake features high-definition graphics, was released as a download for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Windows, Xbox 360, and Xbox One in 2015, and later for the Nintendo Switch in 2019, with a limited edition PlayStation 3 version released at retail in Japan. And, just not going to get into it too much here, right? Because it's sort of its own game. But yeah, that remake though, which was just called Resident Evil, also is incredible. I mean, definitely that's the best version to play in my opinion. I don't say that to discount the original. I still feel like people should experience the original one. But yeah, if you definitely wanted to play the best version, I would absolutely go with this, with the GameCube version that's been ported, to many systems afterwards. It really improves on so many aspects of the game, and probably one of the best remakes out there of all time, in my opinion. But then in novelization, so Resident Evil: The Umbrella Conspiracy is a novelization of the game that was written by S.D. Perry in 1998 as the first book in her series of Resident Evil novels. The novel combines Jill and Chris's scenarios into one narrative and features all 5 of the main characters, including Barry, Rebecca, and Wesker. The book also takes liberty with some of the original source materials, the most notable difference being the inclusion of an original character named Trent, an insider from the Umbrella Corporation who provides Jill with information about the Spencer Mansion prior to the events about the Mansion incident. Since the book was written a few years before the Nintendo GameCube remake, the novelization lacks the presence of Lisa Trevor in the mansion. However, the book does allude to the original version of George Trevor's journal from the true story behind Biohazard, as well as the short story it contained, Biohazard, the beginning, which involved the disappearance of Chris Redfield's friend Billy Rabbitson. Another notable difference in the novels is moving the location from Raccoon City from the Midwest to Pennsylvania, apparently about an hour's drive from New York. Overall, despite having been written before the retcon introduced the Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil 0, the book still maintains overall similarity to what the story warped into the early 2000s. So yeah, that's kind of overall Resident Evil in a nutshell there. For me personally, when I played the game, I was really interested in playing it, with the reviews that it was getting back in the day. And because again, this is before a lot of the really big hitters came out on the PlayStation, right? The games that kind of started defining that system as introducing like a lot of cinematic games, right? So again, like Final Fantasy VII hadn't been released, Metal Gear Solid hadn't been released, and a bunch of other games, right, that kind of started becoming more cinematic. And so this was kind of the first game that started leading towards that, right? Like cinematic kind of like video games. And so I remember playing this game when there was a buddy of mine that he would stay over. He was my poor friend. He had a lot of issues growing up. Not to get into that too much, but basically he kind of bounced around from like foster homes and all. But at one point, though, there was a teacher and her husband that took him in for a bit, and this is when we were teenagers, because I would have been 16 when this game came out. And so I would go over to their house, and, to hang out with him. Well, I remember one day, though, the teacher and her husband, they were out of town. And so then he invited us over to his house there and to have a little bit of a hangout there. And so one of these friends that was there, he brought over the PlayStation along with Resident Evil. And so I remember I got kind of excited. I was like, oh shit, you got this Resident Evil game I've been hearing about. And so we played it all night, right? And I got super engrossed into it. And so then afterwards I was like, hey man, can I borrow this game? Because I really wanted to play this. And so he let me borrow it. And so I played it. I remember I beat the game pretty quickly before I gave it back to him. And yeah, just immediately got hooked on the game, right? Again, a combination of the horror elements of the game, the very engrossing gameplay, which again was still fairly new at this time, was, this kind of cinematic kind of gaming. And then also the sort of Metroidvania style of the game, right, was pretty cool as well too. And so, I mean, this game really inspired me a lot, so much so that I think about a year later, I had a creative writing class. And it was a really cool class, really great teacher and all. But basically, the point of this class was you were just kind of rated as either you passed it or you didn't pass it. And the way to pass it was that you had a folder that you just needed to provide, just stuff into, right? Like whatever you were writing, could be poem, could be a story, could be whatever you wanted to write. Well, anyways, one of the things that I provided, or that I put in there, was a short little story that I wrote that is very heavily inspired by Resident Evil. And what really inspired it to me was the diary entries that you read in the original Resident Evil game. And so if you played this game, I'm sure you're familiar with it, right? So I'll just kind of read it here. So this is it's called the Keeper's Diary, right? And it's found in the original Resident Evil and then also in the remake. But it goes, so on May 9th of 1998, at night, we played poker with Scott the guard, alias, and Steve the researcher. Steve was very lucky, but I think he was cheating. What a scumbag. May 10th of 1998. Today, a high-ranking researcher asked me to take care of a new monster. It looked like a gorilla without any skin. They told me to feed them live food. When I threw in a pig, they were just playing with it, tearing off the pig's legs and pulling out the guts before they actually ate it. May 11th of 1998. Around 5 o'clock this morning, Scott came in and woke me up suddenly. He was wearing a protective suit that looked like a spacesuit. He told me to put one on as well. I heard there was an accident in the basement lab. It's no wonder those researchers never rest, even at night. May 12th of 1998. I've been wearing this annoying spacesuit since yesterday. My skin grows musty and feels very itchy. By way of revenge, I didn't feed those dogs today. Now I feel better. May 13th of 1998. I went to the medical room because my back is all swollen and feels itchy. They put a big band-aid on my back, and the doctor told me I did not need to wear the spacesuit anymore. I guess I can sleep well tonight. May 14th of 1998. When I woke up this morning, I found another blister on my foot. It was annoying, and I ended up dragging my foot as I went to the dog's pen. They have been quiet since morning, which is very unusual. I found that some of them had escaped. I'll be in real trouble if the higher-ups find out. May 15th of 1998. Even though I didn't feel well, I decided to go see Nancy. It's my first day off in a long time, but I was stopped by the guards on the way out. They said the company had ordered that no one leave the grounds. I can't even make a phone call. What kind of joke is this? May 16th of 1998. I heard a researcher who tried to escape from this mansion was shot last night. My entire body feels burning and itchy at night. When I was scratching the swelling on my arms, a lump of rotten flesh dropped off. What the hell is happening to me? May 19th of 1998. Fever gone itchy, hungry and eat doggy food. Itchy, itchy, Scott came. Ugly face, so killed him. Tasty. 4. Itchy. Tasty. So, yeah. And so anyways, I wrote like this story kind of, again, it was very heavily inspired by Resident Evil, right? And also, again, so not only me, right? Just this game just really influenced a lot of people for so many different reasons, right? Again, because of its the kind of game that it was, right? The content behind it, right? Like, being a scary game and all, the way how it was a very cinematic video game, right? I think people were starting to take notice. And that's one of the reasons why the original PlayStation was becoming very popular really quickly, was because it was giving games that was really appealing to the mainstream as well, too. So for many reasons, right? Just a very influential game. And even though the original one, it can be a bit rough to get back into, I still think that it has a lot of charm to get into that game there, and definitely would recommend checking this game out. However, there's various different ways to play this game, right? Again, all the variations of the PlayStation port, or the PlayStation version, and then also the one on the Nintendo DS. And I would recommend playing those games right before you get into the remake, because I think if you get into the remake first, you're gonna have maybe a harder time getting into the original one. So I would just say, if you have any interest in Resident Evil, want to learn all about the history and everything of it, definitely check out this original one. But yeah, just an incredible game overall, right, for what it did to the video game industry. And again, it's a game series that's still going to this day. And what I love about this one is that the remakes, or the sequels and all, Resident Evil has really gone in this, the story, how it branched out, right? In all kinds of way crazy different directions, right? Some more intriguing than others. But what I liked about this original one, though, that it was very more intimate, right? As far as like, you're in this mansion, it's, you feel there's more of a sense of isolation and all. And it's more focused right on the horror genre, right? And where you're just in a mansion trying to survive. It's a very classic trope, right? Used in a lot of scary movies and all. And I think it really played to this game's strength here, and why I think this game has just really stood the test of time. And there's been rumors, supposedly, right, that this game is getting some kind of another remake of some sort. To maybe kind of tie in more with the style of the more recent Resident Evil games. I mean, they recently announced Resident Evil Code Veronica, and so it's possible this game might still be in the works, but I would think if it is, Capcom's been churning these out almost like yearly. And so I would think that if we do get a Resident Evil remake, like another one more in the line of like the more current Resident Evil games, we may not hear about that until probably 2028 would be my guess, but it's potential that it's out there, right? But if not, like I said, the original one still holds up to its own charming way, and then the remake, right, that originally came out on the GameCube, that is still an amazing game as well too. But that's what I got here for Resident Evil. So hopefully this at least gave you some information on this game overall, or at least brought you some nostalgia, right, for this game. And definitely would like to hear any thoughts on what your experience might have been with this game back in the day, or just any thoughts in general. And so assuming if I'm still on schedule for next week, my plan is to do kind of the same deal, right? A bit of a retrospective, bit of a review and all. And that is of Tomb Raider. And so Tomb Raider is one of the games in the 5th generation that really started defining what a 3D game is. I mean, there was definitely Super Mario 64, but Tomb Raider also, which was released shortly afterwards, really had a big influence, right, on 3D gaming in general. And so that's why I wanted to give it some attention, as I feel like it really helped move video games forward. And that's kind of the games that I've been trying to select as much as possible, right, in this retrospectives that I'm doing, is not only really popular games and games that I like, but that I feel had some kind of significance towards the overall video game industry, right, and its influence and all. So hopefully we'll get that out by next week. Until then, take care of yourselves. Hope you have an amazing week, and we will see you in the next one. Have a good one.